The liar paradox. When truth becomes impossible. Have you ever found yourself caught in a loop of thought that seems to have no exit? A mental maze where each turn brings you back to where you started? Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most enduring puzzles in human thought. A simple sentence, just 5 words long, that has confounded philosophers, logicians, and mathematicians for over 2,000 years. This statement is false. 4 words that, when arranged in this particular order, create an impossible situation. If it's true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. Welcome to the liar paradox, where certainty dissolves, where truth and falsehood dance in an eternal embrace, and where the very foundations of how we understand reality begin to tremble. I'm glad you're here with me. Together, we'll venture into this fascinating puzzle that exists at the edge of human understanding. Find a comfortable spot, close your eyes if you wish, and let your mind gently follow where these thoughts lead. What makes the liar paradox so fascinating is its disarming simplicity. This statement is false. At first glance, it seems like a harmless sentence, yet when we try to determine whether it's true or false, we find ourselves in an impossible situation. Let's think it through together. If we assume the statement is true, then what it claims must be the case. And what does it claim? That it's false. So if it's true, then it must be false. But what if we assume it's false? Well, if this statement is false, is itself false, then the statement must be true. So if it's false, then it must be true. True implies false. False implies true. Around and around we go, unable to settle on either truth value. The statement seems to actively resist classification. This is the essence of the liar paradox, a self-referential statement that creates a contradiction when we try to assign it a truth value. It's like trying to catch your own shadow, always just beyond reach. The earliest recorded version of this paradox comes to us from ancient Greece, attributed to Epimenides of Crete, who reportedly said, "All Cretans are liars." Since Epimenides himself was a Cretan, this created a similar logical problem, though not precisely the same as our modern version. The philosopher Eubulides of Miletus, who lived in the 4th century BCE, formulated what we now consider the classical version of the paradox. A man says that he is lying. Is what he says true or false? For thousands of years, this deceptively simple puzzle has challenged our most fundamental assumptions about truth, language, and logic, and that's what makes it so powerful. It forces us to question concepts we usually take for granted. Before we go deeper into the implications and attempted solutions to this paradox, I want you to sit with it for a moment. Feel the gentle tension it creates in your mind. Notice how your thoughts try to resolve the contradiction, only to be pulled back into the cycle. There's something beautiful about these limits of understanding, these edges where our logical systems begin to fray. They remind us that the universe and our minds contain mysteries that may never fully yield to our desire for clarity. Let's continue our journey. What gives the liar paradox its power is self-reference, the statement's ability to talk about itself. Self-reference appears throughout human thought and creation. In art, we have paintings of artists painting themselves. In literature, characters become aware they're in a story. In programming, recursive functions call themselves. But when self-reference enters the realm of truth and falsehood, something strange happens. Our normal ways of determining what's true and what's false begin to break down. Think about how we usually determine whether a statement is true. Take a simple claim like, "It's raining outside." We look out the window, we observe the world, we compare the statement to reality. The statement is about something other than itself. But the liar paradox doesn't direct our attention to anything external. It forms a closed loop, pointing only to itself. This statement is false. There's nothing outside the statement to check against. We're trapped in a circle of reference with no exit point. Zeno's paradox of Achilles and the tortoise, a thought experiment that questions the very nature of space, time, motion, and infinity. Both paradoxes, though different in form, share a common thread: the mysterious nature of infinity and its ability to disrupt our everyday understanding of the world. Take another deep breath as we transition from linguistic impossibilities to physical ones, continuing our journey through philosophy's most elegant challenges. Before we understand the paradox itself, let's take a moment to meet its creator, Zeno of Elea, a pre-Socratic philosopher who lived in the 5th century BCE in what is now southern Italy. Zeno was a devoted student of Parmenides, a philosopher who proposed the controversial idea that reality is unchanging and that motion is merely an illusion. Now imagine living in a time when such an abstract concept seemed to contradict everything your senses told you about the world. People naturally resisted this strange notion. After all, we see things moving all around us every day, don't we? To defend his teacher's seemingly impossible worldview, Zeno developed a series of paradoxes, clever logical arguments that revealed contradictions in our common sense understanding of reality. He didn't necessarily believe that Achilles couldn't overtake the tortoise in a real race. Rather, he was using these thought experiments to show that our conventional understanding of motion and infinity might be fundamentally flawed. There's something rather poetic about Zeno himself, isn't there? A philosopher using logic to argue that our perceptions are unreliable, creating mental puzzles that have survived for millennia. In many ways, his paradoxes were the original viral thought experiments, spreading across generations and civilizations, challenging each new audience to resolve the contradictions he so carefully constructed. What's particularly fascinating is that Zeno's original writings have been lost to time. We know of his paradoxes only because later philosophers like Aristotle and Simplicius quoted and discussed them. There's a beautiful irony there, a philosopher concerned with permanence, whose own words have vanished, yet whose ideas remain immortal. Let's walk through the paradox step by step, allowing the problem to unfold in our minds. The scenario is simple. Achilles, the swift-footed hero of Greek mythology, agrees to race against a tortoise. Being confident in his superior speed, Achilles gives the tortoise a head start, let's say 100 meters. When the race begins, Achilles starts running, perhaps 10 times faster than the tortoise. Now, here's where Zeno's logic creates a puzzle. By the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise started, those initial 100 meters, the tortoise has moved forward some distance, perhaps 10 meters. So Achilles must now cover this additional distance. But by the time he reaches this new point, the tortoise has moved forward again, maybe by just 1 meter. And when Achilles covers that 1 meter, the tortoise has moved forward yet again, by perhaps 0.1 meters. Do you see the pattern emerging? Each time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved slightly ahead. This creates an infinite sequence of smaller and smaller distances that Achilles must traverse before he can overtake the tortoise. Zeno argues that to complete any journey, one must complete an infinite number of sub-journeys. And since it's impossible to complete an infinite number of tasks in a finite time, Achilles can never overtake the tortoise. Number 3, the Zeno's dichotomy paradox, which is that you can never reach your destination because you must always travel half the remaining distance. Imagine you want to walk to the other side of the room. Before you can reach your destination, you must first travel halfway there. Simple enough. But before you can reach that halfway point, you must travel halfway to that halfway point. And before reaching that quarter mark, you must travel halfway to it, reaching the 1/8 point. Before the 1/8 point, the 1/16 point. Before the 1/16, the 1/32, and so on. This creates an infinite series of steps, each one taking you halfway to your goal. Since there are infinitely many points you must reach first, and since you cannot complete an infinite number of tasks in a finite amount of time, you can never reach your destination. Or so argued Zeno of Elea, a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher who lived around 490 to 430 BCE. This deceptively simple argument has become known as Zeno's dichotomy paradox, a philosophical puzzle that challenges our very understanding of space, time, infinity, and movement itself. Imagine yourself in ancient Greece. The air is warm and tinged with salt from the nearby Mediterranean. Olive trees sway gently in the breeze. In the coastal colony of Elea, in what is now southern Italy, a philosopher named Zeno is formulating ideas that will echo through the corridors of time for thousands of years. Zeno wasn't creating paradoxes merely to confuse or entertain. He was defending the philosophical views of his teacher, Parmenides, who proposed something truly radical, that all change and motion are merely illusions. According to Parmenides, reality is singular, unchanging, and eternal. The world of motion and multiplicity that we perceive with our senses is nothing but a deceptive appearance. This was an extraordinary claim, one that contradicted everyday experience. To defend it, Zeno developed a series of paradoxes designed to show that the common-sense belief in motion, when examined rigorously, leads to logical contradictions. If motion itself could be proven logically impossible, then perhaps Parmenides was right after all. The dichotomy paradox was just one of several paradoxes that Zeno created. Others included the famous Achilles and the tortoise paradox, where the swift-footed Achilles can never catch up to a tortoise given a head start, and the arrow paradox, which argues that a flying arrow must be motionless at each instant and therefore can never actually move. These weren't just intellectual games. They represented one of the first systematic attempts in Western philosophy to examine the fundamental nature of reality through pure logical reasoning rather than empirical observation. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient thought experiments continue to resonate with modern questions in philosophy, mathematics, and physics. Though formulated nearly 2,500 years ago, they touch on concepts that would only be formally understood with the development of calculus in the 17th century and continue to inform discussions about the nature of infinity, continuity, and the fabric of space-time in contemporary physics. Number 4. The ship of Theseus paradox, which is that if every part of a ship is gradually replaced, is it still the same ship? This ancient paradox cuts to the heart of how we understand identity, permanence, and change. In its elegant simplicity, it challenges our most fundamental assumptions about what makes something or someone remain the same over time. Tonight, we explore this profound question not as a mere philosophical curiosity, but as a lens through which to examine our own existence. For we too are entities in constant flux, our cells regenerating, our thoughts evolving, our very atoms being replaced while something we call self persists. The ancient paradox. The ship of Theseus paradox originates in the writings of Plutarch, the Greek historian and philosopher who lived between 46 and 119 CE. He tells us of the ship that carried the legendary hero Theseus back to Athens after slaying the Minotaur. This vessel was preserved by the Athenians for generations, a symbol of their history and identity. As time passed and wood decayed, they would replace each damaged plank with a new one. Gradually, over many years, every single component of the original ship was replaced. Plutarch then poses the question that has puzzled philosophers for 2 millennia. Is this still the ship of Theseus, or has it become something entirely new? The paradox deepens when we consider a variation added by the philosopher Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century. Imagine that someone collected all the original planks that were removed from Theseus's ship and used them to rebuild a second, identical vessel. Now we have 2 ships, one maintained through continuous replacement, and one reconstructed from the original materials. Which, if either, is the true ship of Theseus? This seemingly simple question about an ancient vessel opens doorways to profound considerations about identity, continuity, and what it means for something or someone to remain the same through change. The river of identity. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. These words from the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus echo across the centuries, reminding us that change is the only constant. Just as a river appears unchanged while its waters continuously flow, perhaps our identities are not fixed states, but processes, constantly in flux. Consider your own body. In this very moment, millions of your cells are dying and being replaced. The atoms that comprise your physical form today are not the same ones that made up your body 7 years ago. The skin you wear now is not the skin you wore in childhood. And yet, you feel a continuous sense of being you. This persistence of identity despite physical change is what philosophers call the continuity of consciousness. It suggests that perhaps what makes the ship of Theseus the same ship isn't its physical components, but something more abstract. Its form, its function, its history. Think of a river again. The Mississippi River today contains different water molecules than it did yesterday, yet we still call it the Mississippi. Its identity persists through its pattern, its relationship to the land, its continuous flow from source to mouth. Perhaps identity is less about substance and more about pattern, less about what something is made of, and more about how those components are arranged, how they function together, how they relate to their environment and history. Or perhaps identity is found in something even more ineffable, a kind of essence or soul that transcends physical change. Many spiritual traditions suggest that beneath our changing bodies lies an unchanging core of being. As we sail deeper into these waters, remember that the questions we explore tonight have no definitive answers, only perspectives that may illuminate different facets of our existence. Number 5. The Sorites Paradox. The Sorites paradox presents us with a deceptively simple question. If removing one grain from a heap doesn't make it not a heap, when does removing grains cause it to stop being a heap? This ancient philosophical puzzle cuts straight to the heart of how we categorize our world. One grain is clearly not a heap. 10,000 grains certainly form a heap. But somewhere between lies a boundary we cannot precisely define. The ancient origins. The Sorites. Paradox originates with Eubulides of Miletus, a Greek philosopher from the 4th century BCE. Sorites comes from the Greek word for heap. The paradox extends beyond sand heaps. When does a person with gradually thinning hair become bald? How many houses constitute a village? At what point does a room transition from bright to dark as we dim the lights? Our categorical language struggles with continuous gradual change. The logical structure. Let's formalize the paradox. Premise 1. 10,000 grains of sand is a heap. Premise 2. If removing one grain from a heap leaves a heap, then removing one grain from 9,999 grains leaves a heap. Premise 3. By extension, removing one grain from any number of grains leaves a heap. Following this logic, conclusion: one grain of sand is a heap. This conclusion contradicts our intuition, yet each step of reasoning seems valid. Where's the flaw? Philosophical implications. The Sorites paradox reveals tensions in how we categorize reality. We use discrete concepts: heap, bald, tall, yet reality exists on continua without clear boundaries. This paradox challenges three principles of classical logic. The law of the excluded middle. Everything must either be a heap or not a heap. The law of non-contradiction. Something cannot simultaneously be both. Transitivity of identity. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Proposed solutions. Epistemic theory. A precise boundary exists, but we're ignorant of it. Exactly 8,422 grains might constitute a heap, while 8,421 do not. We just can't know this threshold. Supervaluationism. Heap is inherently vague, with borderline cases where the term neither clearly applies nor fails to apply. Fuzzy logic. Statements have degrees of truth between 0 and 1. A collection of 10,000 grains is 100% a heap. A single grain is 0% a heap. Between lies a gradual transition. Contextualism. The threshold varies with context. In a sandbox, 50 grains might be a heap. In a desert, we might require thousands. Nihilism. Vague terms like heap are fundamentally meaningless and should be abandoned. Everyday relevance. The Sorites paradox manifests in our daily lives. When does a person transition from young to old? When does a relationship become serious? When does a habit become an addiction? Our social and moral categories lack clear boundaries, yet we make consequential judgments based on them. Legal systems face similar challenges. Laws must draw sharp lines. Voting ages, blood alcohol limits, tax brackets. These hard boundaries imposed on continuous spectra inevitably create edge cases that seem arbitrary. The deeper meaning. The greatest value of the Sorites paradox lies in how it humbles us. It demonstrates the limitations of human language and conceptual frameworks, tools that are impressively adaptive, yet fundamentally imperfect. The paradox teaches us to embrace nuance and recognize the provisional nature of our categories. It cautions against rigid thinking and reminds us that many boundaries exist in our minds rather than in reality itself. There's something liberating in acknowledging these limitations. When we recognize that many disagreements stem from vague predicates with no clear truth conditions, we might approach one another with greater charity and openness. Number 6. The Theseus's paradox. If the removed parts of the ship are reassembled, which is the original ship? Imagine an ancient wooden ship, weathered by countless voyages across vast seas. This is the ship of Theseus, hero of Greek mythology. Over years of sailing, the ship begins to deteriorate. Piece by piece, each wooden plank is replaced with a new one. Eventually, every single component has been exchanged. Is it still the same ship? This question alone has perplexed philosophers since ancient times, but today we venture deeper into a modern twist that magnifies the paradox, the modern variant. Now picture this: as each original piece was removed from Theseus's ship, instead of being discarded, it was carefully preserved. Once all pieces had been replaced, these original components were meticulously reassembled into a second vessel. So now we have two ships, one maintained through gradual replacement, and another reconstructed from all original materials. Which one is the true ship of Theseus? Pause for a moment. Let this question resonate in your mind. The material perspective. From a purely material standpoint, the reassembled ship contains all the original matter. Every plank, nail, and rope once touched by Theseus himself. The physical substance that existed at the beginning now exists in this reconstruction. If identity is determined by material composition, then surely the reassembled ship is the original. The restored vessel holds the very atoms that constituted the first ship. Its matter has traveled through time, albeit via a different path. Yet something feels unsatisfying about this conclusion. The continuity argument. The gradually replaced ship maintained its form and function throughout the process. It never ceased to be a ship. There was never a moment when we could say, now it has become something else. Its identity persisted through a continuous, unbroken existence. This ship holds something the reconstructed one doesn't. Historical continuity. It carries an uninterrupted timeline, a persistent existence in space and time. Every day of its life, it remained Theseus's ship, even as its components changed. Like a river that remains the same river despite its ever-changing waters, perhaps identity lies in continuity rather than material composition. Identity beyond substance. Consider your own body. Nearly every atom in your physical form has been replaced since your childhood. The materials that constructed your younger self have long departed, replaced by new molecules. Yet you remain you. Are you merely the sum of your physical parts? Or is there something more to identity than material composition? The ship's purpose. Perhaps identity rests in function and purpose. Theseus's ship was created to sail, to carry crew across water, to embody the spirit of exploration. The maintained vessel never lost this purpose. It continued to fulfill its intended function without interruption. The reconstructed ship, while containing original materials, had to be rebuilt from the disconnected parts. Its purpose was broken and later reinstated. Does this interruption of function matter to its identity? The paradox deepens. When we apply this paradox to ourselves, the implications grow profound. If your consciousness could be perfectly duplicated into an identical body, which one would be you? Would both have equal claim to your identity? Would one be more authentic than the other? In a world of advancing technology, where we may someday transfer consciousness or perfectly clone biological life, these questions transcend mere philosophical musings. Beyond binary thinking, perhaps our difficulty with Theseus's paradox stems from our insistence on binary answers. We want to identify one ship as the original and the other as the copy. But reality rarely conforms to such neat categories. Identity might be better understood as multidimensional. The maintained ship holds continuity of function and historical persistence. The reconstructed ship maintains material identity. Both have legitimate claims to being Theseus's ship, just through different aspects of identity. The wisdom in paradox. The beauty of this paradox lies not in finding a definitive answer, but in recognizing that our concepts of identity are human constructions. They help us navigate our world, but they sometimes break down at the edges. Perhaps wisdom comes not from resolving the paradox, but from embracing the limitations of our conceptual frameworks. By sitting with this contradiction, we develop cognitive flexibility and humility about our understanding of reality. Number 7. The barber paradox. Who shaves the barber? Who shaves everyone who doesn't shave themselves? Let this question rest in your mind for a moment. The answer may seem trivial at first, But as we unravel this thread, you'll discover why this question has captivated philosophers and mathematicians for over a century. The paradox. Explained. Let's set the scene. Imagine a small village with a single barber. This barber follows one simple rule. He shaves precisely those people who do not shave themselves. Every man in the village either shaves himself or is shaved by the barber. No exceptions. Now comes the crucial question. Does the barber shave himself? If he does shave himself, then by his own rule he cannot shave himself, because he only shaves those who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then according to the same rule, he must shave himself, because he shaves everyone who doesn't shave themselves. Do you see the contradiction forming? The barber cannot both shave himself and not shave himself. Yet the logic of our scenario forces him into exactly this impossible position. This is the essence of the paradox, a logical impasse with no resolution. The deeper implications. What makes this simple story so profound is that it's not merely a clever word game. Bertrand Russell devised this paradox to illustrate a fundamental problem in the mathematics of his time, specifically in set theory. Imagine the barber's rule as defining a set, the set of all people who don't shave themselves. Now ask whether the barber himself belongs in this set. By the same circular reasoning, he both belongs and doesn't belong, an impossibility in classical set theory. This seemingly innocent contradiction was devastating to early 20th century mathematics. It revealed that naive set theory, the foundation upon which mathematicians were building, contained fundamental flaws that could collapse entire systems of reasoning. Isn't it remarkable how the simplest questions can sometimes reveal the deepest truths? A humble barber in a thought experiment managed to challenge the most brilliant mathematical minds of the era. The resolution. How did mathematicians resolve this crisis? They realized that some forms of self-reference lead to contradictions, and therefore such self-reference must be carefully controlled. The solution came through more sophisticated theories that restricted how sets could be defined. Just as we might place guardrails on a dangerous mountain path, mathematicians placed restrictions on self-reference in logical systems. These developments eventually led to axiomatic set theory and type theory, cornerstones of modern mathematical logic that carefully avoid these paradoxical situations. The barber paradox, in essence, helped mathematics mature. The philosophical dimension. Beyond mathematics, this paradox invites us to contemplate the limitations of language and logic. Our minds and our languages evolved to help us survive in the physical world, to track animals, gather food, and cooperate with others. They weren't designed for navigating the abstract realms of infinite sets and self-reference. Perhaps paradoxes like the barber's are reminders of our cognitive boundaries, places where our reasoning tools begin to break down, not because we aren't clever enough, but because we've wandered into territory our minds weren't evolved to traverse. Next time you find yourself frustrated by a difficult concept or seemingly impossible problem, remember the barber. Sometimes the issue isn't with your understanding, but with the inherent limitations of the logical structures we've built. Modern relevance. Today, the lessons of the barber paradox reverberate through computer science, artificial intelligence, and information theory. Self-reference and recursive definitions are carefully handled in programming languages to avoid creating infinite loops, digital echoes of the barber's dilemma. Even this very narrative you're listening to now, a voice discussing a paradox about self-reference, contains subtle layers of self-reference that would have fascinated Russell himself. Number 8. The crocodile paradox. A crocodile steals a child and promises to return it if the father can correctly guess whether the crocodile will return the child. This paradox has ensnared philosophers for centuries, one that reveals how our very reasoning can twist back upon itself. The ancient predicament. Imagine this scene. A father stands at the edge of a river, his face etched with desperation. Before him, partially submerged in murky waters, waits a crocodile. In its jaws, the father's child. The crocodile speaks with unexpected eloquence. "I will return your child on one condition. You must guess correctly whether or not I will return your child. If your prediction is correct, I will return your child. If your prediction is wrong, I will keep your child forever." This seemingly simple bargain conceals a logical trap that has fascinated minds since ancient Greece. The paradox emerges. Consider what happens if the father says, "You will not return my child." Now the crocodile faces an impossible situation. If it returns the child, then the father's prediction was wrong, which means the crocodile should keep the child. But if the crocodile keeps the child, then the father's prediction was correct, which means the crocodile should return the child. The crocodile is caught in an endless loop of contradiction. No matter what action it takes, it violates its own promise, and this is precisely why we call it a paradox. Roots in ancient thought. This puzzle isn't merely a modern brain teaser. It traces back to ancient Greek logic, specifically to Eubulides of Miletus, who lived in the 4th century BCE. Eubulides created several famous paradoxes that challenge fundamental assumptions about language and logic. The crocodile dilemma belongs to a family of self-referential paradoxes, statements that refer to themselves in ways that create contradiction. Its siblings include the liar paradox. This statement is false. What makes these puzzles so enduring is how they reveal cracks in our logical systems. They show us the limitations of human reasoning and language. Beyond the river, modern implications. The beauty of the crocodile dilemma extends far beyond its ancient origins. Today, we see its shadow in game theory, legal contracts, and even artificial intelligence. Think about promises that contain conditions about themselves, or computer programs that must evaluate their own output. These self-referential structures often create the same logical knots. In game theory, we encounter situations where perfect decision-making becomes impossible, because the very act of prediction changes the outcome. The financial markets often behave this way. A prediction about market movement can cause the market to move in ways that invalidate the prediction. In law, contracts can sometimes create similar paradoxes when their conditions refer to their own enforcement. Escaping the jaws of paradox. So how might our desperate father escape this logical trap? Some philosophers suggest the father could respond, "You will return my child, but not because of this bargain." This potentially steps outside the self-referential loop by acknowledging the paradox itself. Others propose that the father could refuse to play the game entirely. "I make no prediction about your actions." Perhaps the most elegant solution is to recognize that the crocodile's promise is fundamentally flawed. It creates an impossible logical structure. Any bargain that contains its own contradiction cannot be binding. The deeper waters. What makes the crocodile dilemma so haunting is that it reveals something profound about knowledge and certainty. It shows us that even our most careful reasoning can lead us into impossible situations. This paradox asks us, can we ever fully trust systems of thought that can generate their own contradictions? Can language, the very tool we use to understand our world, sometimes create puzzles it cannot solve? Perhaps these paradoxes serve as humbling reminders of our intellectual limitations. They stand like sentinels at the boundaries of what can be known through pure reason. Number 9. The omnipotence paradox. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy they cannot lift it? This is the omnipotence paradox, and it's more profound than it first appears. Settle in as we unravel this philosophical knot together. The paradox unveiled. At its core, this paradox presents us with a logical trap. If we answer yes, that an omnipotent being can create such a stone, then we immediately encounter a contradiction. There exists something this being cannot do, lift the stone. Yet if we answer no, that an omnipotent being cannot create such a stone, we've already identified a limitation to their power. Either way, it seems omnipotence defeats itself. The beauty of this paradox lies in how it forces us to examine our very conception of power and possibility. What does it truly mean to be all-powerful? Logical boundaries. Perhaps the first approach is to consider whether omnipotence should include the ability to perform logically contradictory actions. Can omnipotence mean the power to make a square circle? To create a married bachelor? To make 2 + 2 = 5? Some philosophers argue that these aren't meaningful limitations. An inability to perform the logically impossible isn't a lack of power, it's simply that these concepts are incoherent. They represent linguistic confusions rather than actual possibilities that could be realized. Under this view, the stone paradox might simply be disguising a logical contradiction within itself. The question becomes malformed, like asking whether omnipotence includes the power to both have and not have a certain ability simultaneously. The Aquinas solution. Thomas Aquinas, the medieval philosopher and theologian, proposed an elegant solution. He suggested that omnipotence should be understood as the ability to do anything that is logically possible. Under this definition, creating a stone too heavy for oneself to lift is inherently contradictory for an omnipotent being. The paradox dissolves because it's asking for something that falls outside the realm of logical possibility. But does this solution feel satisfying to you? Does it truly preserve our intuitive understanding of what all-powerful means? Degrees of omnipotence. Another perspective invites us to reconsider what we mean by omnipotence itself. Perhaps there are degrees or types of unlimited power. Could an omnipotent being voluntarily limit its power in certain contexts? Could it create a stone that, according to the rules it establishes for a particular universe or moment, it cannot lift, while retaining the meta-ability to change those rules? This suggests a distinction between first-order and second-order omnipotence, the power to do anything, versus the power to control the very framework of what can be done. The paradox as mirror. What if this paradox isn't really about logical contradictions or theological abstractions, but rather a mirror reflecting something about our own consciousness? Consider how we humans constantly create psychological stones that we then convince ourselves we cannot lift. We establish limitations, then believe in them so completely that they become our reality. The omnipotence paradox might be speaking to our peculiar ability to simultaneously be the creators and the experiencers of our own limitations. In this light, the paradox transforms from a logical puzzle into a profound meditation on consciousness itself, beyond either or thinking. Western philosophy has traditionally been bound by binary thinking. Something either is or isn't, true or false, possible or impossible. But what if omnipotence exists in a realm beyond such dualistic constraints? Eastern philosophical traditions might suggest that true omnipotence transcends our conventional categories of possibility and impossibility. Perhaps an omnipotent being exists in a state where it simultaneously can and cannot create such a stone, not as a contradiction, but as a transcendence of the very framework in which contradictions exist. Number 10. The Epimenides paradox. In a world of certainties, some truths destroy themselves. All Cretans are liars, said Epimenides, a Cretan. If true, his statement must be false. If false, it cannot be true. Welcome to the paradox that has challenged logical minds for millennia. The soft glow of ancient lamplight flickers across weathered stone. We find ourselves in Crete, circa 600 BCE, where a philosopher named Epimenides has just uttered words that will echo through time. All Cretans are liars. But wait, Epimenides himself was Cretan. If all Cretans are indeed liars, then Epimenides too must be lying. But if he's lying about all Cretans being liars, then his statement must be false, meaning some Cretans tell the truth. Could Epimenides be one of these truth-tellers? But if so, his statement that all Cretans are liars would be true, which means he must be lying. The mental loop tightens, squeezing logic until it gasps for air. This is the Epimenides paradox, one of the oldest logical puzzles in human history. Its power lies not in its complexity, but in its simplicity. A single sentence that, when examined closely, begins to devour itself. The paradox belongs to a family of logical conundrums called self-reference paradoxes. When a statement refers to itself, strange things can happen. Consider, this sentence is false. If it's true, it must be false. If it's false, it must be true. The snake of logic eats its tail. Self-reference wasn't formally studied until the 20th century, when mathematicians like Bertrand Russell and Kurt Gödel revealed its profound implications. Gödel proved that any logical system powerful enough to describe basic arithmetic must contain statements that cannot be proven true or false within that system. The Epimenides paradox had found its mathematical expression. Why does this matter? Because self-reference challenges our deepest assumptions about truth. We want neat categories. True statements here, false statements there. The Epimenides paradox blurs these boundaries, creating a twilight zone where statements resist classification. Picture truth as a library. Most statements sit comfortably on either the true or false shelf. But self-referential paradoxes are like books that refuse shelving. Pick up "All Cretans are liars" and try placing it. If you put it on the true shelf, it magically appears on the false shelf. Place it on false, and it teleports to true. Some philosophers propose solving this by introducing a third category: meaningless. Perhaps paradoxical statements aren't true or false but nonsensical, like asking about the color of jealousy. Others suggest truth comes in degrees, not absolutes. Alfred Tarski, a Polish logician, offered another solution: hierarchies of language. He proposed distinguishing between language, what we use to make statements, and metalanguage, what we use to talk about those statements. In this view, "all Cretans are liars" confuses these levels. The paradox also appears in the Bible. In Paul's letter to Titus, he quotes, "One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said the Cretans are always liars." Paul seemingly validates the statement, creating theological versions of the paradox that medieval scholars debated for centuries. Modern computer science confronts similar issues. Self-reference in programming can create infinite loops, computational versions of the Epimenides trap. The paradox foreshadowed Gödel's incompleteness theorems and fundamental limits on what formal systems can prove. The most profound lesson of Epimenides may be epistemic humility. Some questions resist neat answers. Some truths cannot be captured in binary logic. Reality, it seems, is more complex than our tools for describing it. Number 11. The grandfather paradox. What happens if you travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother? What if I told you that the simplest family visit could unravel the fabric of reality? Imagine traveling back in time, meeting your young grandfather, and through some twist of fate, preventing him from ever meeting your grandmother. Would you instantly vanish? Would reality split? Or is there something deeper happening that challenges everything we understand about causality? The classic paradox. Picture this. You step into a time machine, dial back the years to before your birth, before even your parents' birth. You find yourself in your grandfather's youth. Through some action, perhaps intentional or accidental, you prevent your grandparents from meeting. This creates the impossible loop. If your grandparents never meet, your parent is never born. If your parent is never born, you are never born. If you are never born, you never travel back in time to prevent your grandparents from meeting. If you don't prevent them from meeting, you are born, which means you do travel back. And around we go. The logical contradiction feels like a mental Mobius strip, doesn't it? An endless cycle with no beginning and no end. The quantum solution, many worlds interpretation. What if reality doesn't work the way we think it does? Quantum physicists propose the many worlds interpretation, suggesting that each decision point creates a branch in reality. When you travel back and interfere with your grandfather's life, you're not changing your past. You're creating a new timeline. In this new branch of reality, you exist as a time traveler, but the you native to this timeline will never be born. Meanwhile, the original timeline, the one you left, continues unaffected. Your parents and grandparents still met there, and a version of you still exists, perhaps wondering where your time-traveling self disappeared to. Does this mean you're now disconnected from your origin? Are you an orphan of time itself? A visitor from a reality that, from your new perspective, only exists in potential? The self-consistency principle. Perhaps time is more resilient than we imagine. Physicist Igor Novikov proposed the self-consistency principle, suggesting that time paradoxes are impossible because the laws of physics somehow prevent them. If you travel to the past with the intention of preventing your grandfather's meeting, something would always stop you. Your gun would jam. You'd slip on a banana peel. You might even help introduce your grandparents by accident. Time, in this view, has a certain stubbornness. It resists paradoxes, creating a universe where cause and effect remain intact, even with time travelers stirring the pot. Is this comforting or terrifying? That free will might be an illusion when it comes to changing established events? The simulation. Hypothesis connection. Consider this. What if our reality is actually a simulation? The grandfather paradox would simply be an illegal operation, like dividing by zero in a computer program. The simulation would need safeguards against such paradoxes. Perhaps time travel beyond observation is impossible. Or maybe the simulation creates those branching timelines automatically to prevent system crashes. The paradox then becomes less about physics and more about the architecture of reality itself, a glitch that reveals the underlying code, philosophical implications. The grandfather paradox isn't just about time travel, it's about causality, free will, and the nature of existence. If you could kill your grandfather but are somehow prevented, do you truly have free will? If you create a new timeline, is that new reality any less real than the one you left? Does the original you continue to exist, unaware of your journey? Perhaps most profound is what this reveals about identity. If you succeed in preventing your birth in an alternate timeline, are you still you? Or are you now fundamentally disconnected from the causal chain that created you? Number 12. The bootstrap paradox. If you travel back in time and give Shakespeare his own plays before he writes them, where did the plays originally come from? Imagine this. You're a devoted Shakespeare enthusiast who discovers time travel. You journey back to Elizabethan England with a complete collection of Shakespeare's works, eager to meet your literary hero. But upon arrival, you discover something unexpected. William Shakespeare isn't the brilliant playwright history remembers. He's struggling, uninspired, disappointed but opportunistic. You hand him your collection of his plays. Shakespeare studies them, copies them word for word, and presents them as his own. These exact works become the very same plays that inspire you in the future, the same ones you'll eventually bring back in time. And here lies our paradox. If Shakespeare copied the plays from you, and you brought them from a future where Shakespeare was known to have written them, who actually created the plays, they seem to exist in a closed time loop, with no point of original creation. This is the bootstrap paradox, an information paradox, where an object or information is sent back in time, creating a situation where it has no discernible origin. The name comes from the expression, pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps, an impossible action that somehow happens anyway. The bootstrap paradox challenges our fundamental understanding of causality, the relationship between cause and effect. In our normal experience, effects follow causes in a linear progression. The bootstrap paradox creates a circular causality where effect becomes cause and cause becomes effect. Consider the implications. If Shakespeare's works exist in such a loop, they were never truly created in the conventional sense. They simply exist, eternally cycling through time without beginning or end. Information without origin. This paradox extends beyond theoretical time travel scenarios. It makes us question the nature of creativity itself. When we create, are we truly originating something new, or are we assembling existing elements in our consciousness? Are all human ideas ultimately bootstrap paradoxes of a sort, emerging from our collective consciousness and experiences rather than being created ex nihilo? Philosophers and physicists have proposed several ways to resolve this paradox. First, the multiple universe theory suggests that when you travel back in time, you actually create a new timeline. In the original timeline, Shakespeare wrote his plays through genuine creativity. In the new timeline, he received them from you. Both realities exist separately, preserving causality in each. A second possibility is predestination. Perhaps Shakespeare was always meant to receive his works from a time traveler. The universe is a fixed four-dimensional block where past, present, and future coexist simultaneously. Free will may be an illusion, and the loop was always meant to happen. Some quantum physicists propose that information itself may be fundamental to reality, existing independently of its physical manifestations. In this view, Shakespeare's plays might exist as pure information patterns in the universe, merely being discovered rather than created. Perhaps most unsettling is the Novikov self-consistency principle, which suggests the universe naturally prevents paradoxes. If you tried to take Shakespeare's plays back in time, something would always prevent the paradox. Your time machine might malfunction, the manuscripts could be destroyed, or Shakespeare might reject them. The universe maintains causal consistency at all costs. The bootstrap paradox invites us to consider that our conventional understanding of creation and causality might be limited. What if some ideas simply exist in a kind of mental Platonism, a realm of pure forms and concepts that artists and thinkers merely access rather than invent? Think about moments of inspiration in your own life. Haven't you experienced ideas that seem to come from nowhere? Thoughts that felt discovered rather than created? Perhaps those moments are glimpses into the true nature of creativity, not manufacturing something new, but channeling something that, in some sense, already exists. The paradox challenges our linear perception of time and creativity. It suggests that cause and effect might be more complex than we imagine, perhaps even circular or simultaneous in ways our time-bound minds struggle to comprehend. Number 13. The predestination paradox. If you travel back in time to prevent an event, but end up causing that very event, the predestination paradox exists in a closed temporal loop, where attempts to alter the past inevitably fulfill the very destiny one seeks to prevent. Unlike other time travel paradoxes, this one doesn't break reality, it reinforces it through cruel irony. Consider this. You travel back in time because you learned your grandfather was almost killed before meeting your grandmother. In your attempt to save him, you startle him into the street where he's nearly hit by a car, the very incident you traveled back to prevent. Had you never intervened, perhaps he would have walked safely across. This paradox challenges our understanding of free will. Are we truly making choices, or merely following a script already written? The physicist John Wheeler suggested that the universe might be participatory. Observing it changes it, yet paradoxically fulfills what was always meant to happen. Philosophers debate whether predestination paradoxes reveal determinism, the notion that all events, including our choices, are determined by previously existing causes. If your journey back creates the very event you hope to prevent, was there ever any possibility of a different outcome? Neuroscience offers another perspective. Our brains construct the sensation of making choices moments after our neurons have already begun the action. What we perceive as deciding might be our consciousness catching up to what was already in motion, much like a time traveler, believing they're changing history while actually cementing it. The predestination paradox appears throughout storytelling. In Oedipus Rex, the prophecy that Oedipus would kill his father and marry his mother comes true precisely because his parents tried to prevent it. Modern films like 12 Monkeys and Arrival explore how knowledge of the future creates the very future foreseen. This paradox resonates deeply because it mirrors existential questions we all face. How much control do we truly have? Are our efforts to change course meaningful if the destination remains fixed? Perhaps we're all time travelers in a sense, moving through our lives, believing we're altering our fates, while fulfilling them instead. What makes this paradox particularly unsettling is that it doesn't require the universe to break. No matter how desperately we try to create a contradiction, causality remains intact. The loop closes perfectly, suggesting that time might be less like a line and more like a circle, or perhaps a Mobius strip with only one side, despite appearing to have two. Quantum mechanics offers a potential escape through many worlds interpretation. Perhaps when you travel back, you create a new branch of reality, but the branch you came from remains unaltered. Yet this solution feels unsatisfying, as it sidesteps the elegant, terrible beauty of the perfect causal loop. Consider this thought experiment. You receive a book containing your complete biography. Reading it, you discover actions you'll take tomorrow that seem completely out of character. Determined to prove the book wrong, you deliberately act differently, only to find that unexpected circumstances force you into precisely the situations the book described. Your very rebellion was predicted and became part of the narrative. The predestination paradox teaches us a profound lesson. Sometimes our desperate attempts to control outcomes are the very forces that create them. The anxious student who studies all night performs worse due to exhaustion. The jealous lover whose possessive behavior drives away their partner. The nation whose aggressive security measures create the very enemies they fear. Perhaps time travel simply makes visible what is already true about our existence. that cause and effect are more intricately woven than our linear minds can comprehend, and that acceptance might be wiser than resistance. Number 14. The Newcomb's problem. Paradox. A being accurately predicts your choices, but you don't know if the prediction has affected the outcome. Imagine this scenario. You enter a room with two boxes before you. One is transparent, containing $1,000 that you can clearly see. The other is opaque, potentially containing either nothing or $1 million. A being, let's call them the predictor, has studied you extensively and has made a prediction about which choice you'll make. Here's where it gets interesting. If the predictor believes you'll take only the opaque box, they've placed $1 million inside it. If they predict you'll take both boxes, they've left the opaque box empty. The predictor has already made their decision before you entered the room. Their accuracy rate, an astonishing 99%. Your choice now seems simple, yet impossibly complex. Take only the opaque box, or take both? The paradox unfolds. Two compelling arguments. The one-box argument seems obvious at first. Those who choose only the opaque box almost always walk away millionaires. The statistics don't lie. The predictor somehow knows what you'll choose, so why not choose the option that statistically leads to wealth? But wait, consider the two-box argument. By the time you're making your decision, the money is either already in the box or it isn't. Your choice now cannot possibly affect what's already been done. So why not take both boxes? At worst, you get $1,000. At best, you get $1,001,000. This is where our minds begin to twist in fascinating ways. Both arguments seem irrefutable, yet they lead to opposite conclusions. Beyond logic. What this reveals about decision-making. What makes Newcomb's problem so captivating is how it exposes the fault lines in our decision frameworks. Consider how this challenges causality. Can your current choice somehow reach backward in time to affect the predictor's decision? The rational mind says no, yet the evidence suggests some connection exists. Evidence versus influence. The one-boxer says, the evidence shows most one-boxers become millionaires. The two-boxer responds, but you cannot influence what's already been decided. Determination versus free will. If your decision is predictable, was it ever truly free? Yet if it wasn't free, how could you be held responsible for it? The deeper implications, beyond the boxes. What Newcomb's problem ultimately reveals is the tension between different rational frameworks. It's not merely a puzzle about boxes and money, but about how we understand ourselves as decision makers in a complex universe. Consider how this applies to your life. How often do you make decisions based on what has statistically worked for others, one-boxing, versus what seems logically sound in the moment, regardless of patterns, two-boxing? The most profound insight may be this. Our decisions exist in a network of causality more complex than we typically acknowledge. Your choices today are shaped by your past and simultaneously shaping your future in ways that transcend simple cause and effect. A resolution? The many perspectives. Some philosophers argue this is a case where decision theory and probability theory give different answers. Others suggest we need to refine our understanding of causality itself. Perhaps the most intriguing perspective comes from quantum physics. Maybe both choices exist simultaneously until observation collapses the wave function. The predictor may be predicting not what you will choose, but what kind of decision maker you are. The beauty of Newcomb's problem isn't in finding a definitive answer. It's in recognizing how it reveals the limits of our decision-making frameworks, inviting us to develop more nuanced approaches to choice. Number 15. The temporal paradox. If time travel is possible, where are all the time travelers from the future? The paradox explained. The temporal paradox emerges from a simple premise. If humans eventually develop time travel technology, wouldn't we expect visitors from the future to appear throughout our history? Their absence seems to suggest one of several intriguing possibilities. Perhaps time travel is simply impossible, a dream that will forever remain in science fiction. The laws of physics might fundamentally prohibit moving backward through time, no matter how advanced our technology becomes. Einstein's relativity suggests that while time dilation is real, allowing for a kind of forward time travel, moving backward faces seemingly insurmountable obstacles. But what if the absence of time travelers tells us something else entirely? Possible resolutions. The first potential explanation is what physicists call the chronology protection conjecture. The universe might have safeguards that prevent paradoxes. Perhaps attempts to change the past, create new timeline branches, parallel universes where the changes occur, leaving our original timeline untouched. The time travelers might be visiting, but in branched realities we can never observe. Another possibility is more sobering. Perhaps civilization never advances to the point of developing time travel. Some catastrophe, environmental collapse, nuclear war, or an unforeseen disaster might interrupt human progress before we master time. The absence of time travelers could be silent testimony to our limited future. Or consider this. What if time travelers are here, but operating under strict protocols? A coherent time travel civilization would likely establish rules against revealing themselves, interfering with historical events, or creating paradoxes. They might walk among us, observers forbidden from making their presence known. Perhaps the most elegant explanation comes from quantum mechanics, specifically the many worlds interpretation. Each potential time travel event might create its own universe branch. The traveler can only return to their new branch's future, not their original timeline. The timelines proliferate endlessly, with travelers dispersed across an infinity of alternate realities. Scientific constraints. Modern physics reveals why time travel presents such challenges. Einstein's general relativity suggests theoretical possibilities through extreme space-time warping. Wormholes, cosmic strings, or rotating black holes might create closed time-like curves where time loops back on itself. However, quantum mechanics introduces complications. The uncertainty principle might blur any attempt to precisely navigate the past, while quantum effects could prevent paradoxes by making certain interactions physically impossible. Stephen Hawking proposed the chronology protection conjecture, suggesting nature prevents time travel to avoid paradoxes. He even held a party for time travelers, sending invitations only after the event occurred. No one attended, evidence, he claimed humorously, against time travel's possibility. Philosophical implications. The paradox extends beyond physics into philosophy. If time travelers cannot change established history, do we truly have free will? Or are we acting out predetermined events in a block universe where past, present, and future coexist permanently? Perhaps more troubling is what I call the significance threshold. Time travelers, if they exist, would likely visit only historically significant moments. Our lack of observed time tourists might suggest our era isn't important enough to visit. A humbling thought. Or perhaps time travel requires a receiving station, technology that doesn't yet exist in our time. Future travelers might only be able to visit eras after the invention of their particular method, explaining their absence in our present. Cultural impact. The temporal paradox has inspired countless stories, from H.G. Wells to Back to the Future, Dark, and Avengers Endgame. These narratives explore different solutions to the paradox, reflecting our collective fascination with time's mysteries. Some stories embrace the idea that time travelers must preserve the timeline. They've always been part of history, their actions already accounted for. Others explore the multiverse approach, where each change creates a new timeline branch, avoiding paradoxes entirely. Number 16. The bilking paradox. Can you avoid doing something that future evidence proves you did? Imagine this. A time traveler appears before you with evidence proving you'll perform a specific action tomorrow. Perhaps a photograph of you wearing a red shirt and drinking coffee at 9:15 a.m. Armed with this knowledge, you decide to avoid doing exactly that. You'll wear blue instead. You'll drink tea. You'll stay home entirely. But here's where reality bends upon itself. If you successfully avoid the predicted action, then the evidence showing you performing it becomes false. But if the evidence becomes false, then you never had reason to avoid the action in the first place. And if you had no reason to avoid it, you would likely perform it as originally predicted. This creates an impossible loop of causation that defies resolution. Time's logical knot. The bilking paradox strikes at our fundamental understanding of freedom and determinism. It was first formalized by philosophers examining the logical consequences of backward causation, the idea that future events might influence past ones. The term bilking comes from attempting to bilk or evade the causal relationship between evidence and action. But can causation truly be bilked? If time travel allowed you to receive evidence of your future actions, you'd face three possibilities, none entirely satisfying. The evidence is false, rendering time travel unreliable. You cannot avoid performing the action despite your best efforts. The evidence changes as you change your intentions, creating an unstable temporal loop. Quantum uncertainty and many worlds. Modern physics offers intriguing perspectives on this paradox. Quantum mechanics suggests reality isn't deterministic but probabilistic. The many worlds interpretation proposes that all possible outcomes exist in separate branching timelines. Under this framework, the time traveler might come from one possible future, but your choice creates a different branch. Both realities exist, resolving the paradox through multiple timelines. The evidence remains true in one world, while you create another. Information paradoxes. Consider this variation. You receive knowledge from the future with no intention to disprove it. A time traveler teaches you a revolutionary scientific formula. You publish it, becoming famous. Years later, you build a time machine and travel back to give your younger self that same formula. Where did the information originate? Not from your future self, who merely passed along what was learned from your future self. This creates an information loop without origin, a bootstrap paradox nested within our bilking problem. Philosophical implications. The bilking paradox forces us to question our assumptions about free will versus determinism, the nature of time itself, whether the future exists in a fixed state, the logical possibility of time travel, the relationship between knowledge and action. Perhaps most profoundly, it challenges our belief that contradictions cannot exist in reality. If time travel is possible, paradoxes may be features of our universe rather than logical impossibilities. Number 17. The ontological paradox. An object or information exists without ever being created in an endless time loop. The loop without origin. Imagine finding an old leather-bound journal in your attic. Within its pages, you discover detailed instructions for building a time machine. Following these instructions, you successfully create the device, travel back in time, and leave the journal in your own attic for your younger self to find. Now pause and consider. Where did the journal originally come from? Who wrote those instructions first? This is the ontological paradox in its purest form: information or objects that exist without creation, caught in an eternal dance of self-fulfilling prophecy. Beyond human logic, our minds rebel against this concept because we're fundamentally wired to think linearly. We seek beginnings and endings, causes and effects. But the ontological paradox suggests something profound. Perhaps some things simply are. They exist in a closed temporal loop, challenging our most basic assumptions about reality. Consider this. Every effect must have a cause, right? But in these loops, effect becomes cause, becomes effect. An infinite regression that somehow works. The paradox in our world. The implications stretch far beyond thought experiments. Some physicists suggest that our universe itself might be an ontological paradox. The conditions necessary for life to emerge created the beings who would eventually set those conditions in motion through their actions across time. What if consciousness itself is caught in such a loop? What if our awareness of existence is both the result and the cause of existence itself? Living with paradox. Perhaps the most valuable lesson of the ontological paradox is this: not everything needs an origin story. Sometimes existence itself is enough. The loop becomes a perfect circle of creation, where searching for the beginning is like trying to find the start of a circle. This paradox teaches us to embrace mystery, to find peace in not knowing, and to accept that some questions might be unanswerable, not because we lack information, but because our very framework for understanding causality might be incomplete. Number 18. The butterfly effect paradox. How can tiny changes cause huge outcomes, yet reality remains stable enough for prediction? Picture yourself standing in a vast garden, watching a butterfly gently land on a flower. Its wings create the smallest whisper of wind, barely enough to move a single blade of grass. Yet somehow, this infinitesimal movement could theoretically trigger a chain of events leading to a hurricane on the other side of the world. This is the essence of the butterfly effect. But here's where our minds encounter a fascinating paradox. If such tiny changes can cascade into massive consequences, why isn't our world completely unpredictable? Why can we still forecast weather, predict planetary movements, and rely on the sun rising each morning? The dance of chaos and order. Imagine holding a pendulum in your hand. Release it from slightly different positions, and it swings in noticeably different paths. This sensitivity to initial conditions is the heart of chaos theory. But here's the profound truth. Even within chaos, there are patterns. These patterns emerge like islands of stability in an ocean of uncertainty. The same forces that make our world sensitive to tiny changes also create boundaries and attractors that keep reality from spinning wildly out of control. Think of it like a river. While each individual water molecule follows an unpredictable path, the river itself maintains its course. The scale of influence. Let's explore a deeper truth. Not all butterfly effects are created equal. Some changes amplify, while others fade away. It's like dropping pebbles into a pond. Some ripples reinforce each other into powerful waves, while others cancel out into stillness. This selective amplification explains why reality can be both chaotic and predictable. Large-scale patterns emerge from the averaging out of countless small fluctuations, creating what scientists call emergent stability. Time horizons and predictability. Consider weather forecasting. We can predict tomorrow's weather with remarkable accuracy, next week's weather with reasonable confidence, but next month's forecast becomes increasingly uncertain. This isn't a failure of our methods. It's a fundamental property of complex systems. The butterfly effect doesn't mean everything is unpredictable. It means our predictions have natural time horizons. Beyond these horizons, the accumulated uncertainties grow too large to ignore. The paradox resolved. The resolution to our paradox lies in understanding that chaos and stability aren't opposites. They're partners in a cosmic dance. The same mathematical principles that make systems sensitive to initial conditions also create stable structures and patterns. Think of it like jazz music. While each performance is unique and unpredictable in its details, the underlying structure remains recognizable. The butterfly effect ensures every moment is unique, while deeper patterns provide the rhythm and harmony that make our universe comprehensible. Number 19. The delayed choice. Quantum eraser paradox. How can a future measurement affect the past state of a particle? In the depths of quantum reality lies a mystery so profound it challenges our very understanding of time itself. The setup, dancing with photons. Imagine, if you will, a single particle of light, a photon, traveling through space. We send this photon through a special crystal that splits it into two entangled twins. One photon continues forward to hit a screen, while its partner embarks on a longer journey through our quantum maze. The first photon, upon reaching the screen, creates an interference pattern, those characteristic wave-like stripes that remind us of light's dual nature. But here's where reality begins to blur. The paradox emerges. The second photon encounters a series of beam splitters and detectors. These devices can either measure which path the photon took, particle behavior, or erase this information, wave behavior. Here's the mind-bending part. This measurement happens after its twin has already hit the screen. When we look at the results, something impossible seems to occur. If we choose to measure the path, the first photon's pattern changes retroactively, as if it knew what we would decide to do in the future, breaking down reality. But how can a future choice affect a past event? This paradox forces us to question three fundamental assumptions: that cause must precede effect, that the past is fixed and unchangeable, that reality exists independently of observation. Perhaps we're witnessing something more profound, the possibility that time itself is not what we think it is. In the quantum realm, past and future might be more intimately connected than our classical minds can comprehend. The deeper implications. What if reality is more like a vast, interconnected web, where time is just another thread in the fabric? The delayed choice quantum eraser suggests that at the quantum level, cause and effect might dance together in ways our everyday experience cannot fathom. This isn't just abstract physics, it's a window into the nature of reality itself. Every time we perform this experiment, nature reminds us that our comfortable notions of time and causality might be mere approximations of a deeper, more mysterious truth. Number 20. The twin paradox. When one twin travels in a high-speed rocket, they age slower than the earthbound twin, though from the traveler's perspective, the earthbound twin should age slower. Imagine looking into your twin's eyes, seeing a reflection of yourself, but somehow different. They've aged less than you, yet you've lived the same number of years. This isn't science fiction. It's the reality of Einstein's special relativity, manifested in what we call the twin paradox. Picture two identical twins, Sarah and Emma. They share everything: their DNA, their birthday, their initial time. But today, something changes. Emma boards a spacecraft, destined to travel at nearly the speed of light, while Sarah remains on Earth. Their synchronized watches mark the beginning of an extraordinary experiment in time. As Emma's spacecraft accelerates to 99% of light speed, strange things begin to happen. time itself starts to bend. From Sarah's perspective on Earth, she watches her sister's clock tick slower and slower. Each week on Emma's ship corresponds to a month passing on Earth. But here's where it gets fascinating. From Emma's perspective in the spacecraft, it appears that Sarah on Earth is the one experiencing slower time. You might wonder, if each twin sees the other aging more slowly, who actually ages less when they reunite? This is where the true beauty of the paradox emerges. The key lies in acceleration. Emma's spacecraft must change direction to return home, creating an asymmetry in the twins' experiences. This acceleration breaks the apparent symmetry of their perspectives, resolving the paradox. When Emma finally returns to Earth, she has experienced less time than Sarah. This isn't an illusion or trick. It's a fundamental truth about our universe. Emma might have aged 5 years, while Sarah has aged 10. The mathematics of special relativity proves this conclusively, and atomic clocks on fast-moving aircraft have demonstrated this effect, albeit on a smaller scale. Consider what this means for our understanding of time. Time isn't the rigid, universal constant we once thought. It's personal, flexible, and intimately connected to our motion through space. Every time you move, you experience time slightly differently than someone standing still. We don't notice it in daily life because the effect becomes significant only at extreme speeds. Number 21. The Russell's paradox. Does the set of all sets that don't contain themselves contain itself? Imagine yourself as a librarian in an infinite library. Each book in your collection is a set, a collection of other sets. Some books contain themselves in their index while others don't. Now you decide to create a special catalogue, one that lists all books that don't reference themselves. The question emerges: should this catalogue include itself? This is Russell's paradox in its essence, the seeds of contradiction. Let's break this down together. If our catalogue contains itself, then by definition, it shouldn't be in itself. But if it doesn't contain itself, then it must include itself. Like a snake eating its own tail, we're caught in an endless cycle of logical impossibility. Bertrand Russell discovered this paradox in 1901 while working on set theory, the mathematical framework that underlies all of modern mathematics. The implications were staggering. How could something so fundamental contain such a profound contradiction? The mirror of self-reference. Consider for a moment. What happens when we point a camera at its own display? The image creates an infinite regression, each frame containing a smaller version of itself. Russell's paradox is similar. It's what happens when logic looks at itself in the mirror. The paradox reveals something deeper about the nature of self-reference. It shows us that not all seemingly valid questions have answers. Some questions break the very system they're asked within. Beyond the paradox. This discovery led mathematicians to develop new frameworks, axiomatic set theory, where such paradoxes couldn't arise. They learned that unlimited self-reference had to be constrained, just as infinity must be tamed to be useful. But the implications reach far beyond mathematics. Modern echoes. In computer science, Russell's paradox manifests in self-referential programs. In linguistics, it appears in sentences like, "This statement is false." Even in artificial intelligence, self-reference creates fascinating challenges about consciousness and self-awareness. Number 22. The Gödel's incompleteness. Theorem's paradox. In any consistent formal system, there exist true statements that cannot be proven within that system. Imagine a universe where truth and proof are not always the same thing, where some truths remain forever beyond our grasp, not because we're not clever enough, but because of the very nature of mathematical reality itself. This is the profound world of Gödel's incompleteness theorems, the quest for complete knowledge. In the early 20th century, mathematicians dreamed of creating a perfect system that could prove all mathematical truths. They believed that with enough time and careful reasoning, every true statement could be proven. But in 1931, a young mathematician named Kurt Gödel shattered this dream with a discovery that would forever change our understanding of mathematics, logic, and the nature of truth itself. The first incompleteness theorem. Imagine you have a formal system. Think of it as a vast collection of mathematical rules and statements. This system needs to be sophisticated enough to handle basic arithmetic. Now, Gödel showed something remarkable. Within this system, you can construct a statement that essentially says, this statement cannot be proven true within this system. If this statement could be proven true, it would contradict itself, making it false. If it could be proven false, it would actually be true. This is known as Gödel's first incompleteness theorem, a true statement that can never be proven within its own system. The second incompleteness theorem. But Gödel wasn't finished. His second incompleteness theorem went even deeper. It showed that no consistent formal system can prove its own consistency. Think about that for a moment. The very tools we use to prove things cannot prove their own reliability. It's like trying to lift yourself up by pulling on your own bootstraps. The philosophical implications. These theorems reach far beyond mathematics. They tell us something profound about the limits of human knowledge and formal reasoning. Just as our eyes cannot see themselves directly, our systems of logic cannot fully comprehend themselves. There will always be truths that lie just beyond the reach of any given formal system. Real-world resonance. Consider artificial intelligence, consciousness, or the nature of understanding itself. Gödel's theorems suggest that no matter how sophisticated our systems become, there will always be truths they cannot prove, questions they cannot answer. This isn't a flaw. It's a fundamental feature of formal systems themselves. Number 23. The Berry's paradox. The smallest positive integer, not definable in under 60 letters, defines that number in under 60 letters. What makes this statement so remarkable? Well, you've just witnessed a paradox unfold in real time. This very definition, which contains fewer than 60 letters, claims to define a number that cannot be defined in under 60 letters. The contradiction emerges like a snake eating its own tail. Let's break this down together, step by step, in a way that will illuminate its profound implications. First, consider what we mean by definable. A number is definable if we can uniquely identify it using a precise mathematical or linguistic description. For instance, 2 plus 2 defines 4. The smallest prime number defines 2. Each definition captures its number like a perfectly fitted key in a lock. Now let's follow the paradox's logic. If this number exists, we've just defined it in fewer than 60 letters, contradicting its very definition. But if it doesn't exist, then there must be a definition under 60 letters for every positive integer, an equally impossible scenario given the finite combinations available with 60 letters. This paradox teaches us something profound about the limitations of language and formal systems. It reveals a crack in the foundation of how we define mathematical truth, showing us that some concepts resist containment within their own definitional frameworks. Think about it. How can we trust a definition that invalidates itself through its very existence? It's like trying to capture infinity in a finite box. The very attempt creates a contradiction that spills over the edges of our logical containers. Berry's paradox shares DNA with other self-referential paradoxes, like the famous this statement is false. But it does something even more subtle. It exposes the fuzzy boundary between language and mathematics, between definition and reality. As you drift with these thoughts, consider how many other concepts in our world might contain similar hidden contradictions. What other truths might we take for granted that, when examined closely, begin to unravel? The beauty of Berry's paradox lies not just in its clever construction, but in what it reveals about the limits of human understanding. It reminds us that even in mathematics, supposedly the most precise of all disciplines, there exist questions that defy simple answers. Number 24. The unexpected hanging paradox. A prisoner is told he'll be hanged one day next week, but it will be a surprise. He concludes it's impossible, yet it happens anyway. Picture this. A prisoner sits in his cell, contemplating an unusual sentence. The judge has declared that he will be hanged at noon on one of the next 7 days. But there's a twist. The execution must come as a surprise. The prisoner, being a logical thinker, begins to reason through his fate. His logic seems flawless at first. He thinks, it can't be on the 7th day. If I'm still alive by the 6th day, I would know with certainty that the hanging would be on the 7th day. But then it wouldn't be a surprise, contradicting the judge's decree. Following this same reasoning, he eliminates the 6th day. If the 7th day is impossible, and he's still alive on the 5th day, then the 6th day would become predictable, and thus impossible. This chain of logic continues backward through the week, day by day, until he convincingly proves to himself that the hanging is impossible. Yet here lies the beautiful paradox. When the guards come for him on Wednesday at noon, he is genuinely surprised. His seemingly perfect logical deduction failed. But how? Where did his reasoning go wrong? The paradox reveals something profound about knowledge and certainty. The prisoner's logic created a self-defeating prophecy. His certainty that he had logically proved the hanging impossible actually enabled the surprise to occur. It's a perfect demonstration of how our expectations can blind us to possibilities that exist outside our logical frameworks. Think about it this way. The prisoner's knowledge of his fate became part of the very system he was trying to analyze. It's like trying to capture your own reflection taking a photo. The act of observation changes the thing being observed. This paradox has implications far beyond its simple setup. It challenges our understanding of knowledge, prediction, and certainty. Can we ever truly predict surprise? Does the act of prediction itself change what we're trying to predict? In your own life, consider how often your certainty about something has prevented you from seeing other possibilities. How many times has your confidence in knowing what cannot happen blinded you to what actually could? The beauty of this paradox lies in its simplicity and its depth. It shows us that even the most rigorous logical thinking can sometimes lead us astray, not because logic itself is flawed, but because the nature of knowledge and certainty is more complex than we imagine. Number 25. The two-envelope paradox. You always seem to benefit from switching between two envelopes, regardless of which one you start with. What if I told you that your mind can trick you into believing the impossible? That mathematics itself seems to break down when faced with a simple choice between two envelopes? Picture yourself in a dimly lit room. Before you lie two identical envelopes. One contains twice the amount of money as the other. You choose an envelope and open it, finding $100 inside. Now, I offer you a chance to switch to the other envelope. What would you do? Let's think about this together. The other envelope must contain either $50 or $200. If we assume each possibility is equally likely, there's a 50% chance of getting $50 losing $50, and a 50% chance of getting $200, gaining $100. The expected value of switching is 0.5 times $50 plus 0.5 times $200 equals $125. Mathematics seems to tell us that switching is advantageous. We expect to gain $25 on average. But here's where our minds begin to spiral into the paradox. This same reasoning applies no matter what amount you find in the first envelope. If you found $1,000, the other envelope would contain either $500 or $2,000. Again, switching appears beneficial. In fact, this logic suggests you should always switch, regardless of your initial choice. But how can switching always be better? It's mathematically impossible for both envelopes to be better than the other. The heart of this paradox lies in our flawed reasoning about probability. When we open the first envelope, we gain information that changes the nature of our problem. The amount we find isn't randomly chosen from all possible values. It's constrained by the setup of the paradox itself. Our mistake is in assuming that the probabilities of the other envelope containing twice or half the amount are equal. Think about it this way. If one envelope contains $100, and we know one envelope must contain twice the amount of the other, then the two envelopes must contain $50 and $100, or $100 and $200. These are two different scenarios, each with their own probability distribution. We can't simply assume they're equally likely without knowing more about how the amounts were chosen in the first place. The resolution of this paradox teaches us something profound about probability, information, and the importance of carefully examining our assumptions. Sometimes, what seems like perfectly logical reasoning can lead us astray when we haven't fully understood the context of our choices. Number 26. The Monty Hall Problem Paradox. After choosing one of three doors, one unchosen door revealing no prize is opened. Switching your choice doubles your chances of winning. Imagine yourself on a game show. Three doors stand before you, mysterious and identical. Behind one lies a valuable prize, perhaps a car or something even more precious. Behind the other two, nothing but empty space. The rules are simple. Choose a door, any door. But here's where it gets interesting. After you make your choice, the host, who knows what lies behind each door, opens one of the unchosen doors, always revealing an empty space. Then, with a smile that holds secrets, they offer you a choice. Stick with your original door, or switch to the remaining unopened door. The paradox emerges. Your intuition whispers that it doesn't matter. With two doors remaining, surely the probability is 50-50. This is where our minds play their first trick on us. This seemingly simple assumption has fooled mathematicians, professors, and thousands of brilliant minds. The truth? Switching doubles your chances of winning. If you stick with your original choice, you have a 1/3 chance of winning. But if you switch, your probability jumps to 2/3. This isn't just theory. It's mathematically proven, yet it feels wrong to almost everyone who encounters it. Unraveling the mystery. Let's break this down in a way that might forever change how you see probability. When you make your initial choice, you have a 1/3 chance of picking the prize. This means there's a 2/3 chance the prize is behind one of the other doors. When the host opens an empty door, they're not just removing a door, they're concentrating that 2/3 probability into the remaining unopened door. Think of it this way. By switching, you win in every scenario where you initially picked wrong, which is 2/3 of the time. The host's knowledge and actions are key. They're not randomly opening a door. They're using their knowledge to always show you an empty door. The greater lesson. This paradox teaches us something profound about human nature. Our intuition evolved over millions of years to help us survive in a simpler world, sometimes fails us when faced with complex probability. It's a humbling reminder that truth doesn't always align with what feels right. The Monty Hall problem isn't just about game shows or probability. It's about the courage to question our assumptions, the wisdom to admit when we're wrong, and the beauty of mathematical truth that lies just beyond our intuitive grasp. Number 27. The Richard Paradox. Most real numbers cannot be defined, yet we just defined them. Let's begin with a simple truth. Between any two real numbers, there are infinitely many others. This type of infinity is called uncountable. It's larger than the infinity of whole numbers, larger than the infinity of rational numbers. It's so vast that it defies our ability to list or enumerate its members. Now, here's where things get fascinating. Every definition we write must use a finite number of words. Even if we wrote definitions forever, using every possible combination of words in every human language, we could only ever define a countable infinity of numbers. Yet we know the real numbers are uncountably infinite. Can you feel the contradiction building? Here's the paradox in its full beauty. By saying most real numbers cannot be defined, we've just defined precisely those numbers that supposedly cannot be defined. It's like trying to catch smoke with your hands. The very act of grasping changes what you're trying to grasp. This paradox, first discovered by Jules Richard in 1905, reveals something profound about the nature of mathematics and language. We can prove that undefinable numbers must exist, yet in proving this, we seem to define them. It's a perfect example of how our minds can grasp concepts that our language cannot fully express. Think about this. Every mathematical definition you've ever encountered uses a finite sequence of symbols, but the real numbers are like an ocean of infinity, with our definitions being mere droplets within it. The undefinable numbers aren't just rare exceptions, they make up almost all of reality. Let this sink in for a moment. The numbers we can define, pi, e, the square root of 2, and all the others we've named, are just a tiny island in a vast ocean of numbers that exist beyond the reach of human description. They're there, as real as any number we can define, yet forever beyond our ability to specify them individually. This paradox teaches us something profound about the limits of human knowledge and the nature of infinity. It shows us that some truths can only be approached indirectly, like shadows on a cave wall. We can prove these numbers exist, yet we can never point to them directly. Number 28. The interesting number. Paradox. If uninteresting numbers exist, the smallest such number would be interesting for being the first uninteresting number. Imagine we could separate all numbers into two categories, interesting and uninteresting. At first glance, this seems reasonable enough. Some numbers have special properties that make them fascinating, while others might appear ordinary, unremarkable. But here's where things get wonderfully puzzling. If we assume that uninteresting numbers exist, then there must be a smallest uninteresting number. Think about that for a moment. The very first number that has absolutely nothing special about it. But wouldn't that make this number interesting? After all, being the first uninteresting number is itself an interesting property. And therein lies our paradox, the philosophical depths. This paradox reveals something profound about the nature of categorization and human perception. Every time we try to label a number as uninteresting, the very act of identifying it as such gives it a unique property that makes it interesting. It's similar to how trying to be completely ordinary can make someone extraordinary. The moment we declare something utterly unremarkable, we've given it a remarkable quality, mathematical implications. The paradox suggests that every natural number must be interesting in some way. Each one holds a unique position in the infinite sequence of numbers, carrying its own mathematical properties, patterns, or relationships waiting to be discovered. This leads us to a beautiful conclusion. In mathematics, there might not be such a thing as an uninteresting number. Every number, no matter how seemingly ordinary, harbors its own fascinating story, a broader perspective. Perhaps this paradox teaches us something about life itself. How often do we dismiss things as uninteresting before truly exploring their depths? What hidden wonders might we discover in the seemingly ordinary? Number 29. The Banach-Tarski paradox. A solid ball can mathematically be decomposed and reassembled into two identical copies of the original ball. Imagine holding a perfectly solid ball in your hands. Now, imagine performing a series of precise mathematical operations, cutting it into specific pieces, rotating them in particular ways, and moving them through space. When you're done, you haven't just reconstructed the original ball. You've created two identical copies, each exactly the same size as the original. This is the Banach-Tarski paradox, and it's completely mathematically true. The mathematical universe. In today's era, we operate under certain assumptions. When we cut an apple in half, we get two smaller pieces. When we divide our coffee between two cups, each cup contains less than the original amount. This intuitive understanding of volume and division has served us well since the dawn of human consciousness. But mathematics isn't bound by our physical reality. It exists in a realm of pure logic and infinite possibility, the nature of infinity. To understand Banach-Tarski, we must first grasp a fundamental truth. Infinity comes in different sizes. Yes, there are infinities larger than other infinities. Consider this. Between any two numbers, there are infinitely many points. This type of infinity, the continuum, is key to understanding our paradox. The decomposition. Here's where things become truly mind-bending. The paradox relies on breaking our ball into pieces that are not simple shapes, but rather impossibly complex collections of points. These pieces cannot be physically constructed. They exist only in the abstract realm of mathematics. These pieces are non-measurable sets. Think of them as mathematical dust, so fine and intricate that you cannot even assign them a meaningful volume. They transcend our normal understanding of space and measurement, the reconstruction. Through precise rotations and translations, these abstract pieces can be rearranged to form two complete copies of the original ball. It's as if we found a way to create something from nothing, except we haven't. We've simply revealed that our intuitive understanding of volume breaks down at the infinite level. The implications. This paradox isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It reveals deep truths about the nature of infinity, measurement, and the limits of human intuition. It shows us that the mathematical universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we could have imagined. The Banach-Tarski paradox demonstrates that some mathematical truths cannot be reconciled with our physical reality. And perhaps that's the most beautiful part. It reminds us that there are realms of truth that exist beyond what we can touch or see. Number 30. The Simpsons paradox. A trend that appears in different groups of data disappears or reverses when the groups are combined. Imagine you're a doctor studying two treatments for a certain condition. Treatment A seems to work better for both mild and severe cases when looked at separately. Yet somehow, when you combine all the data, treatment B appears superior overall. How can this be possible? This isn't a trick. It's Simpson's paradox, and it's hiding in plain sight all around us. The illusion unveiled. Let me share a real-world example that will gently guide you into understanding this mathematical mystery. Picture a university's admission data. Department X accepts 80% of female applicants and 70% of male applicants. Department Y accepts 30% of female applicants and 20% of male applicants. Looking at each department, women clearly have higher acceptance rates. Yet when we combine the numbers, men suddenly show a higher overall acceptance rate. The key lies in the distribution. If most women apply to the more selective Department Y, while most men apply to Department X, the total percentages shift dramatically. Like a magician's sleight of hand, the truth depends entirely on how we choose to look at it. The hidden variables. Close your eyes for a moment and consider this. Every trend we observe is potentially influenced by invisible factors we haven't considered. Simpson's paradox teaches us that what appears true at one level of analysis might completely reverse when we look deeper. Consider baseball players. A batter might have a higher batting average than another player every single year for a decade, yet somehow end up with a lower career average overall. Each data point tells a truth, but which truth should we believe? Real-world implications. This isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It has profound implications for medicine, social sciences, and public policy. Researchers studying wage gaps, educational outcomes, or medical treatments must carefully consider whether Simpson's paradox might be lurking in their data, potentially leading them to exactly the wrong conclusion. Think about your own life. How many times have you made decisions based on apparent trends? How many of those trends might have been illusions created by hidden variables? The wisdom within. The true gift of Simpson's paradox isn't just statistical awareness. It's a profound lesson about perspective. It teaches us that truth can be layered, that opposing realities can coexist, and that wisdom often lies not in choosing between contradictory facts, but in understanding why they seem to contradict in the first place. Number 31. The Schrödinger's cat paradox. A cat in a box with a random deadly mechanism is simultaneously alive and dead until observed. What if I told you that right now, in this very moment, you exist in multiple states simultaneously? That reality itself is more fluid than we ever imagined. Imagine a sealed box. Inside this box lies a cat, along with a device containing a single radioactive atom. If this atom decays within an hour, it triggers a mechanism that releases a deadly poison. If it doesn't decay, the cat remains unharmed. According to quantum mechanics, until we open that box and observe the outcome, the radioactive atom exists in a superposition of both decayed and not decayed states, and consequently, our feline friend exists in a quantum superposition, simultaneously alive and dead. But this isn't just about cats in boxes. Erwin Schrödinger proposed this thought experiment in 1935 to illustrate something far more profound, the apparent paradox of quantum superposition when applied to our everyday, classical world. Let's go a level deeper into what this really means. In the quantum realm, particles can exist in multiple states at once. An electron can spin both up and down simultaneously. A photon can take multiple paths at the same time. This isn't just theoretical. We've observed these phenomena in laboratories. But why don't we see such superpositions in our daily lives? This is where the measurement problem enters our story. When we observe a quantum system, it collapses into a single, definite state. But what constitutes an observation? Does it require human consciousness, or does any interaction with the environment count? These questions touch the very nature of reality itself. Consider this. If the cat is both alive and dead until observed, who or what counts as an observer? The cat itself? The Geiger counter measuring the atomic decay? Or must it be a conscious being outside the box? Each answer leads us down fascinating philosophical rabbit holes about consciousness, reality, and the role of observation in shaping our universe. Some interpretations suggest that when we open the box, reality splits into two branches, one where we find a living cat, another where we find a deceased one. This is the many worlds interpretation, proposing that all possible quantum outcomes actually occur, just in different parallel realities. But perhaps the most profound insight from Schrödinger's cat isn't about quantum mechanics at all. It's about the limits of our intuition. Our minds evolved to understand the classical world of our everyday experience. When we venture into the quantum realm, our common sense fails us. And in that failure lies a beautiful humility, a reminder that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than we imagine. Number 32. The Olbers Paradox. If the universe is infinite and eternal, why is the night sky dark instead of filled with starlight? Look up at the night sky. What do you see? Darkness, punctuated by countless twinkling stars. But have you ever wondered why the space between those stars is dark? This simple question led to one of the most profound paradoxes in human history, one that challenged our understanding of the cosmos itself. Picture yourself in an infinite forest of trees. No matter which direction you look, there should always be a tree blocking your view. Similarly, in an infinite and eternal universe filled with stars, every line of sight should eventually end at a star's surface. The night sky should be ablaze with light, as bright as the surface of our sun. Yet, it's not. This paradox, first formally described by Heinrich Olbers in 1826, reveals something fundamental about our universe. Let's break it down, piece by piece. First, imagine the universe as an infinite series of expanding shells around Earth. Each shell contains more stars than the one before it. While more distant stars appear dimmer, each shell contains proportionally more stars, perfectly balancing out the diminishing brightness. In an infinite universe, this process continues forever. The mathematics is beautiful in its simplicity. In an infinite, eternal universe filled with stars, every point in the night sky should shine with the intensity of a star's surface. But it doesn't. And this observation helps us understand three profound truths about our cosmos. The universe had a beginning. The light from the most distant stars hasn't had time to reach us yet. The cosmic horizon, the maximum distance from which light could have traveled to Earth since the Big Bang, creates a natural limit to visible starlight. The universe is expanding. As light travels through space, the expansion of the universe stretches its wavelengths, reducing its energy and intensity. This cosmic redshift dims the light from distant stars, preventing them from contributing to the night sky's brightness. Stars have finite lifespans. Unlike in Olbers' infinite eternal universe, real stars are born, live, and die. The universe isn't old enough for infinite generations of stars to have filled space with their light. What appears at first to be a simple question, why is the night sky dark, leads us to fundamental insights about the nature of our universe. It tells us that our cosmos had a beginning, that it's dynamic and evolving, and that even the stars themselves are mortal. Number 33. The Fermi Paradox. If there are billions of stars with Earth-like planets, where are all the aliens? Where is everybody? This deceptively simple query, posed by physicist Enrico Fermi in 1950, has evolved into one of humanity's most perplexing mysteries. Our Milky Way galaxy alone contains over 100 billion stars. Recent discoveries suggest that most of these stars host planets, with an estimated 40 billion Earth-like worlds in habitable zones. The numbers are staggering, yet here we float, seemingly alone in this cosmic ocean. The mathematics of existence tells us something remarkable. Our universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Even if a civilization developed at a modest pace, taking millions of years to achieve interstellar travel, they would have had enough time to colonize our entire galaxy several times over. The cosmic timeline stretches so far that we should be seeing evidence of extraterrestrial life everywhere we look, but we don't. And this is where our paradox deepens. Consider these possibilities that might explain our solitude. We're truly first. Perhaps we're among the earliest civilizations to emerge in our cosmic neighborhood. Like pioneers in an unexplored frontier, we're looking out at a universe that's still awakening to consciousness. Or perhaps we're looking at the wrong signs. Our definition of civilization might be embarrassingly narrow, bound by our limited human perspective. Advanced beings might exist in forms we can't yet comprehend, communicating through methods we haven't discovered. But there's a more sobering possibility that demands our attention: the Great Filter. This theory suggests that there's a crucial developmental stage that most civilizations fail to survive. Perhaps it's the development of nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, or artificial intelligence. If this filter lies in our past, we're incredibly fortunate. If it lies in our future, well, that's a thought that should give us pause. What makes this paradox so captivating isn't just its astronomical implications, but its deeply personal ones. Every time you look up at the night sky, you're participating in one of humanity's greatest thought experiments. Each star you see represents a possibility, a question, a potential story of life. The Fermi paradox forces us to confront our own existence in ways few other scientific concepts can. Are we truly alone? Are we simply early? Or are we perhaps looking for the wrong signs in the wrong places? Some scientists suggest we might be living in a cosmic zoo, carefully observed, but deliberately left undisturbed. Others propose that advanced civilizations might choose to exist in simulated realities, turning inward rather than outward. Each explanation opens new doors of possibility while raising even more questions. As we float through space on our pale blue dot, the silence of the cosmos continues to challenge our understanding of our place in the universe. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Fermi paradox isn't the question it poses, but what our various answers reveal about ourselves, our fears, our hopes, and our deepest existential wonderings. Number 34. Maxwell's Demon Paradox. A tiny demon could seemingly violate the second law of thermodynamics by sorting molecules. Imagine for a moment a being so small it could dance between molecules, a creature so precise it could sort atoms one by one, defying the very laws that govern our universe. This is the story of Maxwell's demon, a thought experiment that has haunted the minds of physicists for over 150 years. The demon's dance. Picture a box, divided into two chambers by a partition. Within this partition lies a tiny door, and beside it sits our demon, no larger than a single molecule. As particles bounce around chaotically in both chambers, the demon performs its simple yet profound task. It watches and it sorts. When a fast-moving molecule approaches from the left chamber, the demon opens the door, letting it pass to the right. When a slow molecule comes from the right, the demon ushers it left. Slowly but surely, hot molecules gather on one side, cold ones on the other. Without expending any energy, this microscopic gatekeeper has seemingly created order from chaos, breaking the universe. But here's where our story takes a darker turn. According to the second law of thermodynamics, one of physics' most fundamental principles, entropy in an isolated system can never decrease. It's why your coffee always cools to room temperature, never spontaneously heating up. It's why time flows forward, never backward. Yet our daemon, with its molecular sorting, appears to decrease entropy without expending energy. Hot gets hotter, cold gets colder, and the universe's most sacred law lies shattered at our feet. How can this be possible? The paradox unraveled. The resolution to this paradox lies in something profound. Information itself has a physical cost. To sort molecules, our daemon must first observe them. To observe them, it must interact with them on a quantum level. Each measurement, each decision about whether to open the door, requires energy. As the daemon gathers information about each molecule's speed and position, it must store this information somewhere. Its memory fills up, like a cosmic hard drive approaching capacity. To continue its work, it must eventually erase this information. And here's the crucial revelation. Erasing information generates entropy. The daemon's sorting may decrease entropy in the box, but the entropy created by its information processing more than compensates. The second law remains unbroken, but we've discovered something perhaps even more profound. Information and physical reality are inextricably linked. The tale of Maxwell's daemon teaches us something remarkable about our universe. It shows us that information isn't just abstract, it's physical, as real as matter and energy. Every bit of data has a thermodynamic cost, a price that must be paid in entropy. This insight reaches far beyond thought experiments. It helps us understand the fundamental limits of computation, the physics of black holes, and even the nature of time itself. In seeking to break the laws of thermodynamics, we've instead discovered their deeper truth. Number 35. The EPR paradox. Quantum entanglement allows instantaneous communication between particles regardless of distance. What if I told you that two particles could instantly communicate across the entire universe, defying our understanding of space and time? This isn't science fiction. It's quantum entanglement, and it challenged even Einstein's perception of reality. The dance of entangled particles. Imagine two dancers, perfectly synchronized, moving as one despite being blindfolded and separated by vast distances. This is quantum entanglement, when two or more particles become so deeply connected that measuring one instantly reveals information about the other, regardless of the distance between them. In 1935, Einstein and his colleagues Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen proposed a thought experiment that would shake the foundations of quantum mechanics. They believed this spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it, revealed a fundamental flaw in quantum theory: breaking the speed limit. Here's where things get truly fascinating. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, nothing can travel faster than light. Yet, when we measure one entangled particle, its partner instantly responds, seemingly violating this cosmic speed limit. This instantaneous connection appears to transmit information faster than light itself. But reality, as often happens in quantum mechanics, is more subtle than it first appears. The nature of reality. The EPR paradox forces us to question our most basic assumptions about reality. Is the universe truly local, meaning objects can only be influenced by their immediate surroundings? Or is there a deeper, non-local connection binding everything together? When we measure an entangled particle, we're not actually sending information faster than light. Instead, we're discovering a correlation that was always there, hidden in the quantum fabric of reality. It's as if the two particles were never truly separate entities, but rather two manifestations of the same underlying reality. Modern implications. Today, scientists aren't just pondering these questions philosophically, they're putting them to practical use. Quantum entanglement is now the foundation for revolutionary technologies like quantum computers and unbreakable encryption systems. What Einstein saw as a paradox has become a powerful tool for advancing human knowledge. The deeper we look into quantum entanglement, the more we realize that our intuitive understanding of reality, based on our everyday experience of the world, may be fundamentally incomplete. Number 36. The black hole information paradox. Information cannot be destroyed, yet seems to disappear in black holes. Let's begin with a simple thought experiment. Take a book, any book, and throw it into a black hole. As it approaches the event horizon, something remarkable happens. The book begins to stretch, its pages elongating like taffy being pulled apart. To an outside observer, time itself seems to slow down, and the book appears to freeze in place, while simultaneously being torn apart by intense gravitational forces. But here's where our paradox deepens. Whispers. What happens to the information contained within those pages? According to Stephen Hawking's groundbreaking discovery in 1974, black holes aren't entirely black. They emit a faint radiation, now known as Hawking radiation. This radiation appears to be completely random, carrying no information about what fell into the black hole. Over time, the black hole will eventually evaporate entirely through this process. But if the black hole disappears, taking with it all the information it ever consumed, we face an impossible contradiction. The laws of quantum mechanics insist that information must be preserved, yet the mathematics of black holes tells us it's gone forever. Which fundamental principle of physics must break? Let's explore 3 possible solutions that physicists have proposed. First, consider the holographic principle. Perhaps the information isn't truly inside the black hole at all, but rather encoded on its surface, the event horizon, like a 3-dimensional hologram projected from a 2-dimensional surface. Every particle that falls in leaves its quantum fingerprint behind. Whispers, but wait, there's more. The second possibility is even more mind-bending. Quantum entanglement across the event horizon. The information might escape through subtle quantum correlations between the particles falling in and the Hawking radiation coming out. Like an intricate cosmic dance, where every particle that falls in is secretly connected to the radiation that escapes. The third possibility ventures into the truly exotic. Perhaps information escapes through microscopic wormholes, quantum tunnels in the fabric of space-time itself. These theoretical bridges might allow information to slip away from the black hole's grasp, preserving the quantum nature of reality. As we sit here, pondering these possibilities, we're touching the very edge of human knowledge. The black hole information paradox isn't just a mathematical puzzle, it's a window into the fundamental nature of information, space, time, and reality itself. What if the paradox itself is trying to tell us something profound? Perhaps we're witnessing the limits of our current understanding, a sign that an even deeper theory of physics awaits discovery, one that might reveal how gravity and quantum mechanics, the 2 great pillars of modern physics, can finally be reconciled. Number 37. The Hilbert's Hotel paradox. A fully booked hotel with infinite rooms can still accommodate infinitely more guests. Imagine standing before an endless hotel, stretching as far as your mind can see. Every room is occupied, with an infinite number of guests sleeping soundly in an infinite number of rooms. You might think there's no vacancy, but this is where our journey into the extraordinary begins. A bus arrives at midnight, carrying a single weary traveler seeking shelter. The hotel manager, despite having every room filled, simply smiles. With a gentle command through the intercom, they ask each guest to move from their current room to the next one up. Room 1 moves to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on, into infinity. Like a cosmic dance of numbers, every guest shifts, and suddenly, as if by magic, room 1 becomes available for our new arrival. But here's where our story takes an even more fascinating turn. Picture now an infinite bus, carrying an infinite number of new guests, pulling up to our already infinite and full hotel. Impossible to accommodate, surely. The manager's eyes twinkle with knowing wisdom. This time, they announce, "Dear guests, please relocate to a room number that is double your current room number." The guest in room 1 moves to room 2 to room 4, room 3 to room 6, and so forth. Through this mathematical choreography, something remarkable happens. All the odd-numbered rooms become vacant, an infinite number of rooms, ready for our infinite new guests. What does this tell us about the nature of infinity? Unlike finite numbers, infinity paired with infinity creates patterns and possibilities that defy our everyday logic. In Hilbert's Hotel, infinity plus 1 equals infinity. Infinity plus infinity still equals infinity. It's a dance of endless numbers that never fills the dance floor. Even if an infinite number of infinite buses arrived, each filled with infinite passengers, our hotel could accommodate them all through increasingly complex, yet perfectly logical, mathematical arrangements. The hotel teaches us that some infinities can be larger than others, yet all can find their place in this paradoxical realm. But perhaps the most profound lesson of Hilbert's Hotel isn't about mathematics at all. It's about the limitations of our own thinking, about how our finite minds grapple with concepts that extend beyond our everyday experience. Just as this hotel challenges our understanding of capacity and space, it invites us to question what other impossible things might actually be possible, if only we expand our perspective. Number 38. Galileo's Paradox. There are as many square numbers as there are whole numbers, despite square numbers being a subset of whole numbers. Imagine 2 infinite lines stretching before you. On the first line, we have all the whole numbers you can think of. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, extending forever into the distance. On the second line, we have only the square numbers. 1, 4, 9, 16. Logically, there should be fewer square numbers than whole numbers, right? After all, square numbers are just a small subset of whole numbers. But here's where our intuition meets its match. The beautiful contradiction. For every whole number, we can find exactly 1 square number by multiplying it by itself. 1 becomes 1, 2 becomes 4, 3 becomes 9. This means we can pair every whole number with a unique square number, creating a perfect one-to-one correspondence. No number is left without a partner, stretching into infinity. Breaking our mental models. Let this sink in for a moment. Even though square numbers become increasingly sparse as we count higher, there are exactly as many of them as there are whole numbers. It's as if we're watching 2 trains, one stopping at every station, the other stopping at increasingly distant stations, yet somehow they both carry the same number of passengers. The deeper meaning. This paradox reveals something profound about infinity. Our finite minds try to apply everyday logic to infinite concepts, but infinity plays by different rules. In the realm of the infinite, a subset can be just as large as the whole. It's like having a hotel with infinite rooms that's fully booked, yet still being able to accommodate infinite new guests. Modern implications. Galileo's paradox wasn't just a mathematical curiosity. It laid the groundwork for Georg Cantor's revolutionary work on infinite sets, transforming our understanding of mathematics. Today, this concept helps us understand everything from computer science to quantum mechanics, reminding us that reality often transcends our intuitive understanding. Number 39. The Mpemba effect paradox. Under certain conditions, Hot water freezes faster than cold water. Picture this. Two identical containers of water. One hot, one cold. You place them both in your freezer. Logic would suggest the cold water should freeze first, right? But sometimes, in a dance of molecules that has puzzled scientists for decades, the hot water transforms into ice before its colder counterpart. A history written in ice. This peculiar phenomenon wasn't first discovered in a modern laboratory. Its story begins with a curious high school student in Tanzania named Erasto Mpemba in 1963. While making ice cream, he noticed that his hot mixture froze faster than his classmates' cold ones. When he questioned his teacher, he was dismissed. But Mpemba persisted, eventually collaborating with physicist Dr. Dennis Osborne to publish their findings in 1969. The dance of molecules. Let's envision ourselves into the microscopic world of water molecules. When water is heated, several fascinating things occur. Dissolved gases escape, creating purer water. The molecules spread apart, becoming more energetic. Convection currents form, creating unique patterns of movement. These changes, rather than hindering freezing, can sometimes accelerate it. Like a carefully choreographed dance, the molecules must align in a specific way to form ice crystals. The paradox explained. The Mpemba effect occurs through a complex interplay of factors. Evaporation reduces the volume of hot water, requiring less energy to freeze. The removal of dissolved gases changes water's molecular structure. Temperature gradients create unique convection patterns. The history of the water molecules influences their behavior. Beyond water. This phenomenon teaches us something profound about nature and science itself. What appears impossible at first glance often contains hidden truths. The Mpemba effect reminds us that reality is more complex and beautiful than our simple assumptions suggest. Think about it. How many other paradoxes exist in our daily lives, waiting to be discovered? What other impossible things might actually be possible if we only look closer? Number 40. The arrow of time. Paradox. Physical laws work the same forward and backward, yet we only experience time moving forward. Picture yourself holding two photographs. One shows a coffee cup shattering on the floor, its pieces scattered in a chaotic pattern. The other shows those same pieces mysteriously rising, assembling themselves back into a perfect cup. Which image represents the past, and which the future? The answer seems obvious. But why? In physics, there's a peculiar thread that, when pulled, unravels everything we think we know about time. The fundamental laws of physics, from Newton's equations to quantum mechanics, work perfectly well whether time moves forward or backward. They're what scientists call time symmetric. Yet our lived experience tells a completely different story. Imagine recording a simple event, like mixing cream into coffee. Play it forward, and you see the cream spread throughout the liquid in intricate cloud-like patterns until it's fully mixed. Play it backward, and something feels deeply wrong. Yet mathematically, both directions are equally valid solutions to the underlying physical equations. This isn't just about coffee and cream. It's about every process in the universe. Heat flowing from hot to cold, light spreading out from stars, memories forming in our brains. They all share this curious one-way nature that physics alone can't explain. The key lies in something called entropy, the tendency of systems to move from ordered to disordered states. But here's the profound part. Entropy doesn't care about time's direction either. It's simply more likely, statistically, for things to become disordered than ordered. Think of shuffling a deck of cards. There's only one way for them to be perfectly ordered, but billions of ways for them to be mixed up. The universe works the same way. It's not that time forces things to become more disordered. It's that disorder is overwhelmingly more probable. This leads us to a stunning possibility. Time's arrow might not be a fundamental property of the universe, but rather an emergent phenomenon arising from probability and initial conditions. The reason we experience time moving forward could be intimately connected to the very beginning of our universe, the Big Bang, which started in an unusually low entropy state. Close your eyes for a moment. Think about your earliest memory. Now think about your most recent one. Why can you only remember the past, never the future? This asymmetry in our memories might be the most intimate way we experience time's arrow. Our very consciousness seems woven into time's fabric. Perhaps the most profound implication is this. In a universe governed by time-symmetric laws, our experience of time's flow might be more about perspective than physics. Like water flowing downhill, time's direction could be less about necessity and more about probability and initial conditions. Number 41. The trolley problem paradox. Is it moral to divert a trolley to kill one person instead of 5? Picture yourself standing beside a railway track on a peaceful afternoon. The air is still, but something isn't right. In the distance, you see a runaway trolley hurtling down the tracks. Your heart beats faster as you notice 5 people tied to the main track, unable to move. They are unaware of their impending doom, but then you notice something else, a lever beside you. This lever could divert the trolley onto a different track. Your momentary relief fades as you spot a single person tied to this alternative track. Time is running out, and you must make a choice that will haunt you forever. It seems deceptively simple. Is it morally right to pull the lever, actively choosing to kill one person to save 5? Let's explore this together, peeling back the layers of moral complexity that make this dilemma so captivating. The mathematics of morality. Some argue that the answer is clear. Simple arithmetic tells us that saving 5 lives at the cost of 1 is the optimal choice. 5 is greater than 1. But can we really reduce human life to such cold calculations? In doing so, are we perhaps losing something fundamental about human dignity? The action versus inaction paradox. Consider this. If you don't pull the lever, are you merely allowing tragedy to unfold, or are you making an active choice? There's a profound difference between causing harm and allowing harm to occur. By pulling the lever, you become an active participant in someone's death. By doing nothing, you remain an observer. But does this absolve you of moral responsibility, the burden of choice? Imagine yourself in the moments after either decision. How would you live with yourself? The person who died because of your action, or the 5 who died because of your inaction? Their faces would likely haunt your dreams. This reveals something crucial about moral philosophy. It's not just about outcomes, but about the psychological burden of moral agency. Real-world applications. This isn't just a theoretical exercise. Modern society faces similar decisions daily. How do we allocate limited medical resources? How should self-driving cars be programmed to react in unavoidable accident scenarios? The trolley problem shapes how we think about artificial intelligence, healthcare ethics, and public policy. The hidden third option. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the trolley problem isn't about the choice itself, but about questioning the circumstances that led to this situation. Why were people tied to the tracks? How did the trolley lose control? Sometimes the most important moral action is preventing impossible choices from arising in the first place. Number 42. The paradox of tolerance. Should a tolerant society tolerate intolerance? Imagine a society that values tolerance above all else, a place where every belief, every ideology, and every worldview is given equal space to exist and flourish. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? But within this idealistic vision lies a fascinating paradox that has challenged philosophers for generations. The heart of the paradox, picture this. A perfectly tolerant society encounters a group that preaches intolerance. Should this society, in the name of tolerance, allow the spread of intolerant beliefs? Or would protecting tolerance itself require some form of intolerance? This was the dilemma that philosopher Karl Popper grappled with in 1945, as he witnessed how the rise of intolerant ideologies had torn Europe apart. His conclusion was both surprising and profound. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance itself. Think about it like an immune system. Just as our bodies must recognize and resist harmful invaders to maintain health, perhaps a tolerant society must maintain some form of resistance to protect itself from ideologies that would destroy it. The practical paradox. But here's where it gets deeper. How do we distinguish between ideas we disagree with and ideas that truly threaten tolerance? Where do we draw that delicate line? The answer lies not in the content of beliefs, but in their methods and actions. When groups or ideologies resort to violence, suppression, or the denial of others' basic rights, that's where tolerance finds its limit. It's not about policing thoughts, but about protecting the fundamental framework that allows diverse thoughts to exist at all. The balance of freedom. Tolerance isn't passive. It's not merely the absence of judgment, but an active commitment to maintaining a space where different viewpoints can coexist and engage in dialogue. Sometimes, paradoxically, this requires setting boundaries. Like a garden that needs occasional pruning to flourish, a tolerant society sometimes needs to trim back forces that would choke out diversity and dialogue. This isn't a contradiction, it's a necessary balance. Living with the paradox. So what does this mean for us as individuals navigating an increasingly complex world? It means recognizing that tolerance has limits, but those limits should be carefully considered and applied only when necessary to preserve tolerance itself. It means understanding that defending tolerance sometimes requires courage to stand against intolerance. The key lies in maintaining what Popper called an open society, one where ideas can be freely exchanged and challenged, but where the basic right to participate in this exchange is protected for all. Number 43. The paradox of fiction. How can we feel emotions about fictional characters we know don't exist? Have you ever found yourself weeping at the death of a fictional character? Your heart racing during a suspenseful scene in a novel? Or maybe you felt genuine joy watching two imaginary people fall in love. You're curled up on your couch, tears streaming down your face as you watch a beloved character sacrifice themselves to save others. In that moment, your grief feels absolutely real. Yet somewhere in your mind, you know with complete certainty that this character doesn't exist. They never did, and they never will. This is our paradox. How can we feel authentic, powerful emotions about people and situations we know are purely fictional? The rational part of our brain knows it's all made up, yet our hearts react as if everything were real. The three pillars of the paradox. Let's break this down into three seemingly contradictory truths that exist simultaneously in our minds. First, we experience genuine emotions about fictional characters and events. Second, we know, without any doubt, that these characters and events are purely fictional. Third, We generally believe that it's irrational to feel real emotions about things we know don't exist. Yet all three of these statements are true when we engage with fiction. This is what philosophers call an antinomy, a contradiction between principles, each of which seems true on its own. The psychology of emotional investment. What's fascinating is how our minds create what psychologists call a cognitive backstage, a space where we can simultaneously hold two contradicting beliefs. When we engage with fiction, we enter a state of willing suspension of disbelief, but it's more complex than simply pretending. We're not just temporarily forgetting that the story is fictional. Instead, we're operating in a unique mental state where we can fully embrace the emotional reality while maintaining our awareness of its fictional nature. Think of it like dreaming while being aware that you're dreaming. The evolutionary perspective. But why did our brains evolve this remarkable ability? The answer might lie in the power of simulation. Our capacity to feel emotions about fiction might be a byproduct of our mind's ability to run complex social simulations, a crucial skill that helped our ancestors navigate increasingly complex social structures. By feeling real emotions about fictional scenarios, we're essentially running emotional simulations that help us prepare for real-life situations. Every story we engage with becomes a safe space to experience and process complex emotions. The value of fictional emotions. Perhaps the paradox itself is what makes fiction so valuable to human experience. These emotions aren't just real, they're important. They allow us to experience perspectives we might never encounter in our real lives, process difficult emotions in a safe, controlled environment, develop deeper empathy and emotional intelligence, rehearse emotional responses to potential future scenarios. The paradox of fiction isn't just a philosophical puzzle. It's a window into the remarkable complexity of human consciousness. Our ability to feel deeply for fictional characters might seem irrational, but it's actually a testament to our species' extraordinary capacity for empathy, imagination, and emotional simulation. Emotional. Number 44. The paradox of analysis. If a philosophical analysis is correct, it seems trivial. If informative, it seems incorrect. Imagine you're holding two identical pieces of glass. One represents a concept we want to understand, and the other represents our analysis of it. When they perfectly match, have we learned anything new? When they differ, is our analysis even correct? This is the essence of our paradox. When we analyze something correctly, we're essentially saying A is B, where A and B are the same thing. But if they're truly the same, what new knowledge have we gained? Yet if our analysis tells us something new, doesn't that mean A and B are different, and therefore our analysis is incorrect? Take a simple example. A bachelor is an unmarried man. If you already understand what a bachelor is, this analysis seems trivial. If you don't, how can you be sure this analysis is correct? The paradox emerges in this space between knowledge and discovery. This paradox challenges the very foundation of philosophical inquiry. If every correct analysis is merely stating the obvious, how do we ever learn anything new? Yet we know we do learn, we do understand, we do make progress. Something in our initial premise must be flawed. But what? The resolution lies in understanding that concepts have layers of meaning. When we analyze something, we're not just matching identical pieces. We're revealing the intricate structure hidden within our understanding. Like a master jeweler examining a diamond, each new angle reveals another facet of truth. Consider how a child learns what numbers are. The concept of 2 isn't just memorizing a symbol. It's understanding quantity, sequence, and relationship. Each layer of analysis brings new insight while remaining true to the original concept. Perhaps the true beauty of the paradox of analysis lies not in solving it, but in what it reveals about the nature of understanding itself. It shows us that knowledge isn't a simple matter of matching definitions. It's a dynamic process of unfolding comprehension. When we analyze something correctly, we're not just repeating information. We're illuminating the rich network of connections that give concepts their meaning. Like a map that is both identical to the territory it represents and yet teaches us new ways to navigate it. Number 45. The paradox of self-reference. This sentence is referencing itself right now. Consider this simple sentence. This sentence is referencing itself right now. At first glance it seems innocent enough, but when you truly contemplate it, you're witnessing something extraordinary. Language folding back upon itself, creating a strange loop of meaning. The nature of self-reference. Self-reference occurs when something refers to itself. It's the linguistic equivalent of holding a mirror to a mirror, creating an infinite reflection. Our minds can grasp this concept, yet it creates a peculiar tension in our logical frameworks. This sentence contains 5 words, is true precisely because it contains 5 words. It describes itself accurately. But what about this sentence is false? If it's true, then it must be false. If it's false, then it must be true. We've stumbled into paradox territory. These aren't just word games. They reveal fundamental limits to our systems of knowledge and language. Gödel's incompleteness theorems. In 1931, mathematician Kurt Gödel shook the foundations of mathematics with his incompleteness theorems. Using ingenious self-referential formulas, he proved something profound. Any consistent formal system powerful enough to express basic arithmetic must contain statements that can neither be proven nor disproven within that system. There are truths that cannot be proven. Gödel essentially created mathematical statements that say, "I cannot be proven within this system," similar to our paradoxical sentence. If such a statement could be proven, the system would be inconsistent. If it couldn't be proven, then the statement would be true but unprovable, making the system incomplete. This wasn't just a mathematical curiosity. It demolished the dream of creating a complete, consistent mathematical foundation for all knowledge. The liar paradox and self-reference. The ancient liar paradox. This statement is false, is perhaps the most famous example of troublesome self-reference. If true, it's false. If false, it's true. This infinite oscillation between truth values reveals something profound about language and logic. When language points to itself while making claims about its own truth or falsity, we enter a twilight zone where traditional logic breaks down. Our mental frameworks, designed to process information about the external world, struggle when forced to process information about themselves. Is this a fundamental limitation of thought itself? Strange loops in consciousness. Douglas Hofstadter, in his book Gödel, Escher, Bach, proposed that self-reference isn't just a quirk of language. It's fundamental to consciousness itself. Our awareness involves a strange loop, where the self perceives itself, creating a level-crossing feedback loop. When you think about yourself thinking, you're creating a self-referential loop. Your consciousness is, in some sense, a system that can model itself. You're aware of being aware right now, aren't you? This recursive quality of consciousness might be what separates simple information processing from true awareness. The paradoxes of self-reference aren't bugs in our cognitive systems. They might be essential features of what makes us conscious. The map and the territory. Consider the relationship between a map and the territory it represents. What happens when the map includes itself? If completely accurate, the map would need to include the map itself, which would include the map itself, and so on, an infinite regression. This is beautifully illustrated in Jorge Luis Borges' story about cartographers creating a one-to-one scale map of their empire, which eventually covers the entire territory it was meant to represent. Self-reference creates these vertiginous, infinite regressions, like standing between two mirrors. Our minds can conceptualize them, but never fully resolve them. Beyond paradox, the beauty of self-reference. Not all self-reference leads to paradox. When handled carefully, it can create profound beauty and meaning. Think of M.C. Escher's Drawing Hands, where two hands draw each other into existence, or Bach's musical compositions that fold back upon themselves in perfect mathematical harmony, or the way DNA contains the instructions to create the very systems that will read and interpret it. Self-reference, when channeled creatively, doesn't just break systems, it can create new levels of meaning and understanding. The edge of knowledge. The paradoxes of self-reference reveal the boundaries of our logical systems. They show us where our mental models break down, where the map cannot fully capture the territory. But rather than being discouraging, these limitations invite us to transcend them, to develop new ways of thinking that can embrace paradox rather than be defeated by it. Number 46. The heap of wealth paradox. At what point does adding one more dollar make someone wealthy? Have you ever wondered about that invisible line between being not wealthy and wealthy? That mysterious threshold where adding just one more dollar transforms your financial identity completely? This is the heap of wealth paradox, a modern variation of the ancient Sorites paradox, which asked, if you have a heap of sand and remove one grain, is it still a heap? When does it stop being a heap? Let's explore this paradox together and uncover what it reveals about our relationship with money. The paradox explained. Imagine someone with exactly $1. We would all agree, this person is not wealthy. Even with $10 or $100 or $1,000, few would consider this true wealth in today's economy. But what about someone with $1 million? Many would consider this wealthy. 10 million? Almost certainly wealthy by most standards. Yet here lies our paradox. If adding $1 to a non-wealthy person doesn't make them wealthy, then when exactly does the transformation occur? Is there a specific dollar amount where someone crosses the threshold from not wealthy to wealthy? The answer reveals something profound about how our minds create categories and boundaries in concepts that are inherently continuous. The vagueness of wealth. What makes this paradox so intriguing is that wealth is what philosophers call a vague predicate, a concept with fuzzy boundaries, like tall, old, or bald. Wealth exists on a spectrum without clear demarcation lines. This vagueness isn't a flaw in our thinking. It's a feature of how humans navigate a complex world. We need these fuzzy concepts to make sense of continuous variation. Yet they inevitably create these paradoxical edge cases. Consider that the definition of wealth varies dramatically across geographic location. Wealthy in rural Cambodia versus wealthy in Manhattan. Historical periods. Wealthy in 1850 versus 2025. Cultural contexts. Wealth as property, connections, knowledge, or spiritual abundance. This reveals our first insight. Wealth is not an intrinsic property of having X dollars, but a relative contextual judgment. The psychological threshold. While there may be no logical point where one more dollar makes someone wealthy, psychologically, we experience wealth in threshold moments. The first time you don't check your bank balance before making a purchase. The moment you realize you could stop working for a year and be financially secure. The day you recognize you have more than you need to meet your core desires. These thresholds aren't about specific dollar amounts, but about the relationship between your resources and your needs and wants. This reveals our second insight. Wealth is as much a psychological state as a financial condition. Wealth as freedom and possibility. Perhaps the most valuable way to understand wealth is through the lens of freedom and possibility. Each additional dollar doesn't just add a fixed amount to your net worth, it expands your realm of possible actions and choices. The first few $1,000s might free you from immediate financial stress. The next might enable education or skill development. Beyond that, you gain time freedom, location independence, and eventually the ability to influence larger systems. This reveals our third insight. The value of additional wealth diminishes as total wealth increases, creating a natural subjective boundary around what feels wealthy. The paradox resolved. While the heap of wealth paradox has no perfect resolution, it teaches us several profound lessons. Binary categories often fail us when describing continuous phenomena. Wealth is a spectrum, not a binary state. Context matters tremendously. Wealth is always relative to time, place, and purpose. Our subjective experience creates natural boundaries that logic alone cannot determine. The most meaningful measure of wealth may be what it enables rather than what it is. Perhaps the question isn't how much money makes someone wealthy, but rather, what relationship with money allows a sense of abundance? Number 47. The mere addition paradox. Is a larger population with slightly lower average happiness better than a smaller, happier population? Imagine you're the architect of worlds, faced with a choice between two possible futures. In World A, there exists a population of 10 billion people living lives of remarkable fulfillment. Let's call their happiness level 10 out of 10. Their needs are met, their days are meaningful, their relationships are deep. Now consider World B. It contains those same 10 billion people, but with a slight reduction in quality of life. Perhaps an 8 out of 10. Still quite good, but noticeably less than World A. However, World B also contains an additional 10 billion people living lives worth living, but at a lower happiness level of 6. Which world is better? Your initial reaction might be that World A is clearly superior. After all, shouldn't we maximize the happiness of those who exist, rather than bringing more people into existence at the cost of others' well-being? But here's where philosopher Derek Parfit's paradox begins to unfold. Consider 3 scenarios. World A, 10 billion people at happiness level 10. World A, plus World A, plus an additional 10 billion at happiness level 6. World B, 20 billion people at happiness level 8. Most people would agree that adding happy lives to the world without making anyone worse off cannot make the world worse. So World A plus seems at least as good as World A dash. This is the mere addition principle. Now compare World A plus to World B. In World B, we've redistributed resources, so everyone has the same happiness level of 8. This seems like an improvement over the inequality in World A plus. If everyone would prefer this distribution, how could it be worse? But this creates a troubling cycle. A seems better than B, A plus seems at least as good as A, and B seems better than A plus. This is logically impossible. We've created a preference loop. This paradox forces us to question our most basic moral intuitions. If we believe that adding happy lives to the world cannot make it worse, and that equality is desirable, we are led to the repugnant conclusion that a vast population with lives barely worth living could be better than a smaller, ecstatically happy population. Think about what this means for our decisions today. Should we prioritize raising the quality of life for existing people, or expanding humanity's reach? Does each new happy life add value to the universe, regardless of how it affects the average? Consider population growth on our finite planet. When we celebrate reaching milestones like 8 billion humans, are we right to cheer? Or should we be concerned about what this means for future quality of life? The paradox extends beyond Earth. As we contemplate becoming a multiplanetary species, should we spread human consciousness across the stars, even if it means each individual might have somewhat less? Is there inherent value in more conscious beings experiencing existence? Some philosophers, like Jan Narveson, argue, we are in favor of making people happy, but neutral about making happy people. Others, like Parfit himself, struggled with this problem for decades without finding a satisfactory answer. Perhaps the resolution lies in recognizing different types of value. Total utilitarians focus on the sum of all happiness. Average utilitarians care about the mean happiness level. Person-affecting views only consider effects on existing individuals. Each approach resolves the paradox differently, but creates new problems. Number 48. The Pinocchio paradox. What happens if Pinocchio says, "My nose will grow now"? If Pinocchio's statement is true, then his nose should grow. But that would make his statement false, which means his nose shouldn't grow. Yet if his nose doesn't grow, then his prediction was false, which means his nose should grow. Round and round we go in an endless cycle of contradiction. The nature of self-reference. What makes the Pinocchio paradox so compelling is that it's a perfect example of self-reference, a statement that refers to itself. Self-reference appears throughout philosophy, mathematics, and computer science, creating puzzles that challenge our understanding of truth. The ancient Greeks encountered this with the liar paradox. This statement is false. If true, it's false. If false, it's true. The Pinocchio scenario gives this abstract puzzle a tangible form we can visualize. Breaking down the logic loop. Let's consider the possible outcomes when Pinocchio says, "My nose will grow now." If the statement is true, his nose should grow, as he predicted. But Pinocchio's nose only grows when he lies. Since his prediction came true, he told the truth, which means his nose shouldn't grow. We've reached a contradiction. If the statement is false, his nose should grow, because he lied. But if his nose grows, then his prediction, "My nose will grow now," comes true, which means he told the truth. Another contradiction. This circular reasoning creates what logicians call a paradox, a seemingly sound argument that leads to contradictory conclusions, beyond simple solutions. Some might suggest that Pinocchio's nose would simply remain unchanged, or perhaps grow and then immediately shrink. But these solutions miss the deeper point. The paradox reveals limits in our logical systems themselves. In the early 20th century, mathematician Kurt Gödel proved that any formal system complex enough to express basic arithmetic must contain statements that cannot be proven true or false within that system. The Pinocchio paradox illustrates this incompleteness in an accessible way. What this teaches us about thinking. The value of the Pinocchio paradox isn't in solving it, but in recognizing what it reveals about language and logic. Our intuitive understanding of truth has limitations. Self-reference creates unique logical challenges. Some questions may be fundamentally unanswerable. The rules we use to understand reality sometimes break down. When we encounter paradoxes, we're glimpsing the edges of human reasoning. These aren't failures, but opportunities to expand our thinking beyond binary true-false categories. Number 49. The paradox of thrift. Individual saving is good, but if everyone saves during an economic downturn, it harms the economy. The paradox of thrift illuminates a fundamental tension in economic behavior. When you save money individually, it represents wisdom, security, and planning for uncertainty. Yet paradoxically, if everyone simultaneously decides to save during an economic downturn, this collective behavior can deepen the very crisis it aims to protect against. Let's unravel this mystery together. At its core, the paradox of thrift, first conceptualized by economist John Maynard Keynes, reveals how our economic system functions as an interconnected web, rather than isolated individual actions. One person's spending is another person's income. When you purchase a coffee, you provide revenue to the cafe owner, who pays their employees, who then buy groceries, creating income for the grocer. This continuous flow of money, this velocity of exchange, is what keeps an economy healthy and vibrant. But what happens during times of uncertainty? Perhaps a recession looms, jobs seem precarious, or the future appears clouded. Our natural instinct, quite rationally, is to save, to withhold, to prepare for potential hardship by keeping our resources close. Imagine now that this instinct grips not just you, but your neighbor, your co-worker, your entire community. As everyone simultaneously reduces spending to increase savings, businesses see fewer customers, revenue falls, employers cut back hours or lay off workers. Those newly unemployed people must then drastically reduce their spending, creating a downward spiral. This cascading effect, where prudent individual actions collectively trigger economic contraction, is the essence of the paradox. The very act meant to protect us ends up harming us when multiplied across society. Our collective fear creates the very outcome we feared. Consider this historical example. During the Great Depression, as unemployment rose and fear spread, those still employed naturally saved more of their income. This widespread reduction in consumption further weakened businesses, leading to more layoffs, creating a vicious cycle that deepened and prolonged the economic suffering. But doesn't saving create investment? Shouldn't banks take those savings and lend them out to businesses, stimulating growth? In normal times, yes. But during severe downturns, banks become risk-averse. Businesses see little reason to borrow and invest when consumer demand has collapsed. The saved money sits idle rather than circulating productively through the economy. This insight revolutionized economic thinking. It suggested that during severe recessions, the government might need to become the spender of last resort to maintain the flow of money when private citizens and businesses have withdrawn into saving. By injecting spending into the economy through public works or stimulus programs, governments can potentially break the negative cycle created by the paradox of thrift. The paradox teaches us something profound about complex systems. What benefits the individual part doesn't always benefit the whole. This pattern appears throughout nature and society, in ecology, traffic flow, and social dynamics. The whole becomes something distinct from simply the sum of its parts. Number 50. The Fitch's paradox of knowability. If all truths are knowable, then all truths are already known. Imagine a world where every secret could eventually be discovered, every mystery solved. A comforting thought, isn't it? That given enough time and resources, humanity could uncover all the truths of our universe. This principle is known as the knowability principle, the idea that all truths can, in principle, be known. But what if I told you that this seemingly innocent principle leads to a startling conclusion, that if all truths are knowable, then paradoxically all truths are already known? Welcome to Fitch's paradox of knowability. Let's break this down step by step. The knowability principle can be expressed formally as, if P is true, then it's possible for someone to know that P is true. Seems reasonable, right? If something is true about our world, surely it's possible for someone to discover it. Pause for effect. But this creates a logical trap. first identified by philosopher Friedrich Fitch in 1963. Here's how it unfolds. Consider this statement. There is at least one truth that nobody knows. Is this statement itself knowable? Let's call this statement Q. If Q is true, then by the knowability principle, someone could know Q. But what would it mean to know that there is at least one truth that nobody knows? Voice slows, becoming more deliberate. If I know that there is at least one truth that nobody knows, then I know that this specific truth exists, but I can't identify which truth it is, because the moment I identify it, I would know it, and it would no longer be unknown. This creates a contradiction. I cannot simultaneously know that there is a truth nobody knows, while also knowing which truth it is. The very act of knowing Q undermines Q's truth. And here's where the paradox delivers its punch. If all truths are knowable, then the statement, "there is a truth nobody knows," must be false. And if there is a truth nobody knows is false, then its negation must be true. The negation is, all truths are known. So by accepting the innocent-looking knowability principle, we're forced to conclude that all truths are already known. A conclusion that seems obviously false given our limited knowledge. What does this mean for our understanding of knowledge? Perhaps we must reject the knowability principle and accept that some truths are fundamentally unknowable. Perhaps there are limits to what human minds can comprehend. Or perhaps the paradox reveals something deeper about the nature of truth and knowledge themselves. Maybe truth isn't independent of minds in the way we typically assume. Consider the quantum world, where observation itself seems to impact reality. Perhaps there's an analogous relationship between knowledge and truth at a philosophical level. Philosophers have proposed various solutions. Some restrict the knowability principle to certain types of truths, excluding self-referential claims. Others embrace anti-realism, the view that truth is somehow dependent on our cognitive capacities. Still others deny that knowledge distributes across conjunctions. Perhaps I can know P and Q without knowing P and knowing Q individually. Each solution comes with its own philosophical costs and benefits, and none has achieved universal acceptance.